early alpha, whatever we want to call this, which is active. But there are a lot of people with access to the game. So, like I said, it is kind of one of these things where it is the biggest open secret in all of gaming. It's very interesting watching it develop. Anyway, this is the actual SteamDB as of right now. We're going to refresh this, so we're going to get the up-to-date numbers. Well, look at this. You can see this is starting to ramp up. Even if we go back and look a month ago, well, look at this. You had sort of 2,000 players active there, and we're going forward to like 2,500 players or so. And then suddenly we see at the start of August, it's like that's when they started to, I guess, ramp up access to the game, and there's a lot more concurrent players. And obviously, this peaked here at 16,947, which was yesterday, 21 hours ago. Will this go higher? Probably, because it seems to be going higher as the days go on, as more people get access to the game. Now, what I want to do is we're going to go and take a look at this post over on Reddit. Now, this is from Valve, and from our Valve, I should say. And as the title says, Deadlock crossed 10,000 plus concurrent players, and it's not even announced yet. It might as well be an open beta at this point, which, yeah, I think it kind of is. I think personally what's happening, and I think it's kind of clever from Valve's perspective, is by not allowing content to be made on the game and not allowing people to, stream the game, make TikToks, YouTube videos, whatever, or even talk about what they're doing and show off what they're doing. It almost puts a lid on, I guess, unfinished stuff being out there. Because you might say, oh, this is bad, this doesn't make any sense, but then it gets fixed a few weeks later, but then the videos are already out, they're already doing damage, the streams have already been made, the content creators have already sort of spoken, so to speak. So I think it's quite interesting, but it is a massive open test. I just realised I haven't got me with the light on. Let's turn that on. Is it broke? There we go. But yeah, it's basically a massive open test. So in this thread, though, people do talk about their experiences, which I think we can go over and we can talk about, because we do know bits and pieces about Deadlock. We do know it is Valve's third-person MOBA that sort of looks like a bit of Dota with a bit of Overwatch, maybe a bit of Apex Legends thrown into it. Now, what's the reaction? This is the big question. So let's just go through all of this. So, you got, obviously this person's talking about it, blah blah blah. This though is sort of, I guess, a little bit of a bit of a tip. If you do want to get access, you can go to Deadlock the game on Reddit, and you can try and request. But as I say, you probably know somebody who knows somebody who's got access to this game. In fact, before we go through this thread, if we take a look at SteamDB, and if we go to the whole of SteamDB, and we take a look at most played games, it's actually quite interesting how fast this is coming up the list. So, I mean, we're obviously these have got like 30,000 players. We're only at like 16,000 at the moment. But it's kind of funny just seeing it like there. Look, Deadlock. It's just there and it's got 15,000 players. But I mean, it's probably already got more players, dare I say it, than Smite. I don't even know where Smite would be. I guess we could search for it. But surely Smite's got more than 5,000 players, right? I'm not seeing it though. Oh dear. Oh no, there it is. Look, so 7,000. So it's basically doubled the number of Smite players. And if you guys remember, the Smite CEO, who makes Smite? Who makes Smite? Hi-Res Studios. He was basically saying, like, this is kind of bollocks what Valve are doing, because they're almost sniping Smite 2, because Smite 2 is coming out at some point. But yeah. Anyway, let's go back and take a look at this thread and see what people are saying. So we're just gonna like read these off and then just try and gauge what people are thinking about this. Anyway, let's do it. So it's essentially like Dota 2 back in the day. It was invite only and depended on the users to invite each other. You occasionally received single-use key invites. This invite flow helps Valve grow interest for the game without slamming the servers, which is true. That is true. I agree with that. That's fine. And like Valve are obviously, when you look at Valve and the way they develop games, they're a very different company to a lot of other companies. I mean, they've got obviously the revenue generation of Steam, but they're privately owned. And Valve pay their developers absolute top whack. They spend tons of money for their staff because they want them to sort of be the best in the game. They want them to be looked after. And obviously Valve's got a weird company structure as well, where there's no hierarchy. You can kind of just work on whatever you like. So if you like the idea of something, you can go over and work on that. But it's not all roses, right? Valve doesn't always make games that work. Look at Artifact, right? Look at Underlords. I mean, I think Artifact's probably the best example. That just went nowhere. So yeah, they don't always hit it off, but it looks like a Deadlock is where they're probably going to hit it off. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. I couldn't possibly comment. Anyway, I guess it's actually fun then, or is that unintentional cope by me? And this user says, it's actually really fun. I was a doubter before I started playing last night, but Valve might actually be onto something here. Same, I was a skeptic, but the gameplay absolutely converted me. I've only played for about an hour, and I think this is the first MOBA I've played. But I'm pretty happy with how it plays so far. It's kind of a lot at first, and I'm sure Valve will tweak the UI so there's not so much in your face 100% of the time. But regardless, it's still really fun. Kind of like a third-person TF2. Then people saying, how the hell did you get invited? Which you just need to know somebody and you can get invited. Despite me not being the intended audience for Deadlock and only playing against hard bots with a friend for an hour, it's really fun. It even has that Valve feel to it. While I won't be coming back for seconds, I can definitely see this becoming popular once it releases. So this person doesn't like it for some reason, but can see why it would be popular, but doesn't really elaborate. So, yeah. Anyway, core gameplay is already fun, but again, it's an alpha state, so players should not expect polish. I've already put in over 100 hours. So this to me is what's going to be quite interesting. Because there's people out there who've had access to this game for a long time. I couldn't possibly comment on that. But they've had access to it for a long, long time. And they're going to be, whenever the game is, let's say, public, they're going to be going into this with, like, a lot of experience, shall we say. You know, especially maybe potentially, possibly certain esports players. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, I've already put in over 100 hours. It's just enough MOBA to appeal to the MOBA players, but it simplifies things in a way where anyone can pick it up. It will take time to learn, but nowhere near as much as something like Dota. And this is the thing where I start thinking, you know what, actually, yeah. Because I look at my experience with Dota. I've got 70 hours in Dota. I've got more hours in other games. Why don't I play Dota? Now, you know what? I played a shitload of League of Legends. I played League when it first came out, right? I actually remember at the time getting my friends to play it, and they were like, what is this? It's free. You don't have to pay it. It don't make no sense. What's going on? But we played Heroes and Newerth, and then we went into League. So I've got, like, I don't even know how many hours in League, but this was like, I mean, it's over 10 years ago now. It's got to be. I was just playing it all day, every day, non-stop, right? And then that was, I got to a point where I just was like, no more League, no more MOBA, and then I left. I did try Dota 2 throughout the years, but I could never get into it. It was impenetrable, too complicated. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know about the items. I didn't know anything. So the news that this game is already converted, like this player, for example, because it's not as steep. Maybe it's got more emphasis on aiming, for example, than on, you know, just pure knowing what to do at any given moment in time. The Dota brain. That's probably a good sign. So this user actually goes on to ask another question and says, I don't think this person actually responds. But no, I can't see that person responding, so I guess that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I think it will be a hit if they add more game modes. I think it will probably die if they try to treat the current map like they do to Dota 2's. Now, I'm guessing that's just because there's one map in Dota 2, and that's it. Possibly, I don't know. Gameplay seems fun, but some heroes seem anti-fun and created towards esport. I mean, it's Valve, right? It's going to be... This will be an esport, this game. It's going to absolutely be an esport. That's just going to happen, right? So, see what I mean? Like another. I'm 400 hours in. Like, what the hell? I'm 400 hours in and I still can't wait to play every night. This game is really sick new take on the MOBA genre. Now, of course, obviously, these could just be people making this up. But I think given the caliber, or I guess the quantity of invites that have gone out, and we can see from things, you know, just like looking at SteamDB, where we can see there's already like an astronomical amount of people playing this game. I mean, for something that's supposedly just in a test phase, it's crazy. So I think these comments can be believed. And also, you can dig deep on the internet and you will find gameplay footage. Obviously, I'm not going to show any of it in this video. I don't want to break NDAs. The game is not, you know, it's not for public consumption at the moment. But there is a lot of stuff out there if you want to dig deep and search for gameplay, so you can get an idea of what's going on with the game and how it plays. But yeah, this person says, MOBA fans seem to be enjoying it. But if you don't like MOBAs, it's not going to win you over. I've never had a good time with them, but after playing for a few hours the other night, it just feels to me like Team Fortress 2 or your class-based shooter of choice, but with all the fun over-designed out. Okay, valid point. It's curious how they don't even announce it yet, at least. Yeah, it is true. Let's have a look. I was skeptical of this game myself since I played all variations of Paragons, and it looked like third-person MOBA doesn't work. Smite is not that popular too, but damn, Gaben is onto something. Game is super fun. Yeah, it's pretty fun, but I'll give it a month full after release until the cheaters take over. Yeah. Somebody even saying here, I'm pretty sure there's aimbots already. Again, I've got 40 hours in the game, and I've seen people not miss a single target. Ice Frog seems to really know what he's doing when it comes to balancing. My problem with Predecessor and all those other games is that they lean too heavily onto the skills and don't make use of the 3D environments as much. Meanwhile, this one actually emphasizes on movement and mechanical shooting skill too. Some of the greatest aimers I've ever played against were in TF2 and CSGO, so it's going to be really cool for those kind of people to come over and mix it up with the macro handling of a MOBA. Now, this is a really interesting comment, right? Because as much as people want to shit on Overwatch 2, and well, let's just say Overwatch, it does require a degree of like mechanical aim, which is not really equivalent to any like attack shooter, right? It's more like Quake in a lot of ways, right? It's like an arena shooter, and it looks to me like this game is similar to that. So you can see why there is a crossover there. But I think what's interesting about this comment is it almost puts forward the sort of hypothesis that this is a game that if you do like action-based games, you do like shooter games. I mean, it's a third-person shooter, but you do like shooters. You like that movement element, so maybe you've got your Overwatch for the sheer arena shooter and the abilities, I guess. Then you've got Apex for your movement. You throw that in there. Then what happens if you say, well, you've got the Dota items or even potentially like League-style items, but it's obviously going to be more Dota because you know Ice Frog is working on this game, and Ice Frog obviously is the lead balance there for Dota 2, and it's Valve, so it's obviously going to be Dota-inspired with the item builds. But it's bringing those elements together, and it's like, is there a mid-ground? And I think this is the play Valve are going for. Is there this gap of like players that maybe don't want to go too far into a MOBA because it's too, let's say, technical, too macro, but they're willing to go a little bit into that, maybe for some basic item builds, but then they also want an action-based game. They want something that they can rely on their speed of reactions, their movement, and things like that, which obviously in a MOBA, you're just clicking a mouse, right? I don't know, obviously, you've still got to move, you've got to know when to use your abilities and all of that stuff, but it's not the same as actually being in a 3D world, is it, and moving up and down, you know, or a three-dimensional world. Well, I guess Dota's three-dimensional, whatever. You know, you can go up and down, right? So there could be a space for this, but then on the other side of the argument, it's the whole thing of like, this is almost like a game ChatGPT would build. If you said, take all the most popular games and then give me a game, it would say, why don't you make a third-person hero MOBA? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, yeah. So I can get where people are coming from with that. Anyway, let's keep going through these comments. I think they're quite interesting. I'm not a MOBA fan at all, and I tend to avoid this genre, but I do enjoy hero shooters quite a lot. Do you think I will enjoy this? You might, because even though it has all of the MOBA aspects, it's still a third-person shooter. You've got heroes that focus on sniping and precise aiming. If you can't aim, you can play heroes that don't focus on it that much. If you're a god aimer, so like Shroud, there are ways to use that too. But fights are mostly close combat. There is a huge bullet drop-off. Utilizing spells, farm, and items is huge, like in all MOBAs. Now, the bullet drop-off point, that's, I mean, if you think about what this game is trying to be, that has to be in the game. You can't just have the ability to, you can see someone, you can do full maximum damage to them. But think of things like turrets as well. Like, imagine if you could just, you know, like if you're playing League, if you could just like destroy the turret from your base, it would be like, what the hell is this? It would be insane. So you can see why that's in this game. So it does make sense. But it's interesting there to think that if you can aim, then that's going to be powerful in this game, because obviously that has got absolutely no bearing on your ability to play a MOBA. You know, like your aim just doesn't matter. I mean, precision of clicking, sure, and maybe you could say high APM helps, but actual raw mechanical aim doesn't matter. Any melee or stealth-based heroes, I usually gravitate towards those. Spy in TF2, Reaper in Overwatch, sneaking around. There is one with an invis skill and some bruises too that prefer close combat. Any combat is more or less medium to close, since bullet drop-off is quite big. Yeah. There are definitely melee builds. One hero specifically has an awesome kit for melee. Been playing it is almost exclusively because of it. Probably a fan of a very popular anime. Anyway, is it me, or is this just the exact opposite of how Valve handled Artifact beta? Now, I know Artifact was announced, and it was announced at TI, and we'll get onto this in a second, because, in fact, well, let's do it now. I can't say we'll get onto it in a second when we can do it right now. But they announced this at one of the TIs, I think. But this is the next TI, so it's actually coming up, right? So 2024's TI is in September. Well, the group stage is September the 4th to September the 5th. So this is like in a month. And it makes sense if you look back at this and you see this build-up here at the start of August, really ramping up the amount of players that potentially, come September, we're going to have like an open beta or everybody has got access to the game in Steam, which would make sense. But anyway, going back to this is potentially where they would announce it. Not at the start of the event, but possibly at the end. So I guess September the 10th or maybe September the 15th either, when the finals, before the finals kick off, that might be when they've got like a flashy trailer, they've got a blah, 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 and then they show off essentially their new MOBA game, which would make sense. So that's probably where I would bet we get some sort of an announcement. If we don't, then again, I don't know. And it's Valve. We could just get an announcement literally today. Who even knows? But yeah, let's just carry on going through this thread just to see what other people are saying. So this person gives a bit of a breakdown. It's fun, but it does need work, which it'll get since it's still quite a bit from release. I think it definitely needs balance and adjustment in the characters. I also feel the map is pointlessly big, but that's probably something that won't be changed. Though I wish there was a sprint button, maybe there is. The UI needs an adjustment, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is a bit much to take in with how it's portrayed, but the core is very good. And I don't doubt that it'll be very polished once it's released. And this user actually, I was trying to read that off while also reading this. How can I even do that? Anyway, there is a dash button with shift, and there is a sprint mechanism. I like the size of the map because there is so much mobility. Knowing how to move around the map becomes a skill. So again, that's the thing, right? You know, TF2 movement was a very, it was a skill, right? If you could move well, we've all seen like incredible soldier players, rocket jumping and all that stuff. You were strong, right? So it looks like we're getting that in this, which is pretty interesting. And it will be one of those things, I think, where you can probably tell a good player from a bad player. Someone knows how to effectively move, which says you've got things like a dash button with shift and there's a sprint mechanism. Maybe you can combo them together, but it'll just be one of those things where you'll see better players use the map better and move around quicker. In fact, this user even says that, yeah, definitely, my second match went much better as I learned to move around more efficiently. Yeah, so I think that goes without saying. It's really fun. People who were playing it before weren't lying. Yes, the game looks unfinished, but it's pretty fun. Another person asking about invites. Okay, I did not like everyone hating on the game when it came out. It's Valve. In all likelihood, it's going to be an amazing game with a great world, great gameplay, and great characters. And all of that is why I'll not even be looking at this game, because I know it will be completely abandoned. Valve, whatever. That's just a rando Reddit comment. Okay. Somebody asking for access. Okay. So I do actually have, there is another thread, which I believe would be this. Yeah, so on games. This was actually, they were cross-posting the one we were just looking at, but I think we'll just take a look at some of the top comments here. Hopefully there's some like breakdown as to how the game plays and stuff. So this user's just saying, imagine Valve never actually acknowledges it. It's just on Steam. It basically is already anyway. You know what I mean? It's like anyone can get this. It's so crazy to me. It's weird because obviously you can imagine, like, from my perspective, if a new game comes out and you want to play it, and like for me, you want to make content on it, or if you're a streamer, you want to stream it, or even if you just like, just anybody and you want to stream it to your friends, it's like you can't, but you can actually just invite them and play with you if you've got access. It's so strange. Yeah, I don't think Marvel Rivals and Concord, if it released at the same time, yeah, that's fine. I don't know, don't really care. That's not really okay. Valve, okay. So just another person highlighting SteamDB, talking about it, ramping up access. Is it still USA only? I'm in Asia. It only takes 10 seconds to find a match. EU's got matchmaking as well. They've got NA, Europe, Asia, Oceania. So this must be getting really close to launch or announcement. I mean, like, they're ramping up the users. They've got multiple servers all over the world. Yeah. This user says it's very polished and far along, though a few characters are still in the process of a materials pass, and the environment has a handful of temp assets. I did get a kick out of one character's temp lore blur being just, this guy's an asshole. I've been super impressed with the game so far. I'm curious how well a new MOBA in 2024-2025 will do, though. This user says, I think it's fun, but in no way would I say it's polished, not even close to polished by Valve standards. Okay, interesting. So Dota 2 in fall of 2011 was also full of first version temp unfinished stuff. That was also when they started ramping up invites for the first time. Dota 2 had its official launch in mid-2013, but it was pretty much finished by the end of 2012. Everybody who wanted to play was already playing, and the hero pool was finally in a good state. Now, Deadlock is probably in a similar state to Dota 2 in November 2011. Maybe a bit rougher, even though the invites are being handed out faster. It will probably also have a longer beta phase, but I guess people will mostly have access by the end of the year. Then it released in 2025. It's polished in the sense that the game is fully playable without noticeable bugs. And then someone says, that is not polished, that is working. Looking at gameplay, there are quite a few rough edges. Been playing this game every night for a week. It's super fun with friends. Team fights, late game, are crazy good and chaotic fun. I mean, that's Overwatch, right? So if that's true, that's Overwatch. So if you're an Overwatch fan, you look at this and think, holy shit, this is like, could this be Overwatch? I mean, when you think of Overwatch, you know, we were sort of led to believe by the devs that they were going to implement an item system for PvE. I even played like a very early version of that back in 2019 at BlizzCon. But like, you had the potential there for items that would affect the character's builds. It almost seems like this might be that if you want that. Because if team fights are crazy good and chaotic, you've got the Overwatch element, but then you've got the added element of item builds and all of that stuff coming in. Could be insane. MOBA shooter is a different genre in my opinion too. Plus, this is Valve, a massive company. I'm sure they also learned for Artifact. I mean, yeah, like this user says, no, MOBA shooter, I mean, yeah, Monday Night Combat, Super Monday Night Combat, Battleborn. You could even possibly throw Smite into that. I know Smite technically isn't that, but it is kind of third-person MOBA. So the lines are getting blurred. I think Paragon was, right, from Unreal, which quickly got cancelled because they made Fortnite. I actually did a brand deal for Paragon. That's why I remember it. Amazing. Anyway, we'll read one last comment off and then we'll leave it as that. Because, like I said, a lot of this can just sort of be people just posting shit. Who knows? But it does seem like a lot of people have got access to this. Because, like I said, you can look at SteamDB and you're like, okay, there's a lot of people playing at the moment. Where were we? Were we on this? Are we even on the right page? I'm not even sure I'm on the right page. Yeah, I think this was the one, right? They're all so similar. I think this is the one, though. Anyway, I'm really surprised they allow so many players in. This game is not even in the alpha stage, all features ready, and a lot in this game is still experimental. Even most models are still placeholders. Sure, Dota 2 also soft launch, unfinished, but the gameplay loop and art was ready, finished, just needed more heroes. This game feels like it still needs 1 to 2 years. Oh, hang on. This person says, hang on, what's this? Yoshi, the Valve dev for Deadlock, said all art and even character designs are still temporary. So there are artists in the forums posting their proposed final design, and they're very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, guys, when we look back, or we sort of look at this, and we look at this game and what this could be, we know what this game is. Because you can go out there and you can Google and you can see footage. You can, you know, we know it's a third-person shooter MOBA with items, and it's in a new world, and it's got heroes. The question will be, when are they going to announce this as an open beta? The other question will be, how will this game actually, you know, our players... I'll leave the question to you guys. Are you actually excited for this? Is the prospect exciting of a third-person, hero-based MOBA with items on what people are saying is a big map? Is that interesting to people? I don't know. On paper, like I said, it sounds like a ChatGPT game, but also... we read what people are saying about the game. They're like, this game's great. I mean, like I said, you can go out and look at the Twitter feeds of various esports players that potentially maybe played Overwatch in the past. You can see their thoughts on it.
We will deport the foreign jihad sympathizers, and we will deport them very quickly, and Hamas supporters will be gone. If you hate America, if you want to eliminate Israel, then we don't want you in our country. We really don't want you in our country. I will ban refugee settlements from terror-infested areas like the Gaza Strip, and we will arrest the pro-Hamas thugs who vandalize federal property and make really life very, very difficult in this country for a lot of people. When I'm president, we will deport federal property and make really life very like the Gaza Strip. And we will arrest them. I will ban refugee settlements from terror-infested areas like the Gaza Strip, and we will arrest the pro-Hamas thugs who vandalize federal property and make really life very, very difficult in this country for a lot of people. When I'm president, we will deport the foreign jihad sympathizers, and we will deport them very quickly, and Hamas supporters will be gone. If you hate America, if you want to eliminate sitting so proud. I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. And they're rated equal. I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon.
Competition begins in 60 seconds. Competition begins in 30 seconds. Competition begins in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Penis Scout, I must query, why are you not playing Scout?
La misión comienza en 60 segundos.
Specifically, why not Penis Scout? The class.
La misión comienza en 30 segundos.
Must say, Penis Scout, it appears we've stumbled across a natural paradox.
La misión comienza en 10 segundos. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. misión finaliza en 60 segundos. La misión finaliza en 30 segundos. La misión finaliza en 10 segundos. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. La bomba se acerca a un control. Has ganado más tiempo. Se acerca a un control.
¡Me encanta, doctor! ¡Gracias, Herr Doctor! ¡Médico! ¡Pon dispensador aquí! ¡Pon dispensador aquí! ¡Pon dispensador aquí! ¡Pon dispensador aquí! ¡Eres genial, doctor! ¡Doctor!
La misión finaliza en 60 segundos.
The car's not moving, lads!
La misión finaliza en 30 segundos.
The car is bloody stopped! ¡Puto spy! ¡Espía esto! ¡Puto spy!
La misión finaliza en 10 segundos.
¡Un spy!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Tiempo extra. La bomba se acerca a un control.
The car's not moving, lads! Mind the car, lads! The car is bloody stopped! The car's not moving, lads! The car is bloody stopped!
くれてありがとう。クロエさんがよかったら
in, I think it was 60 or 61, and he wasn't even president of the Screen Actors Guild then. He had been, I think, like 6 years later, his term had run out. But he came back and got that rammed through because that was the right thing to do. That was when he was a Democrat.
Wow.
Yeah. He got us, I mean, we have the best health insurance of any union I can think of. And that was because of Ronald Reagan.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Do you think that expressing your conservative viewpoints and doing this film on Reagan, do you think this ultimately has the potential to hurt your career?
I don't care anymore. There was time that I was kind of concerned to kind of like speak my mind or speak up. But in this, really in the last couple of years, that I feel it's really important that we do, all of us, speak up. In this election, everybody's got to choose a side. And we have to, in order to have this exchange of ideas and dialogue, we have to speak up. And so, like I said, they when I was doing Reagan, there was a story that came out that I was taking money from the CDC, $400,000, the Trump administration had arranged so I could do a commercial on for the vaccine that was coming out, but none of which was true. But, it's like my son even called me like freaking out, because it was just like I was going to get canceled over this stuff because I was taking, I guess, taxpayer money from the CDC, making money off this. But none of it was true.
And where did it come from? Did they find the source?
I really have no idea. It's something that circulated in social media. So I really don't know. But that, and I remember when when COVID first started, I think it was Politico that I did a phone conversation with, because I was involved with this podcast company that we were promoting, and it was, just happened to be at COVID, and the guy asked me what I thought about the way Trump was handling the COVID, and I said, well, at least he's there every day. He's there every day trying to do something, and I think when it comes to things like this, we need to get behind our president as a whole, to come together to fight this thing, just like Franklin Roosevelt getting behind, during World War.
5.11, giving us DX12, which is supposed to put more load on your GPU rather than your CPU, DLSS and FSR support, HDR support.
Alright, so welcome back. Hopefully all of you guys are having a fabulous day here today. I wanted to show this to you. I'm going to make this clear before this video starts. Again, you could take this however you want to take this. It's an image that basically we got at the start of the season, and a lot of people were slowly finding hints in the image, and it sort of portrays an image of what you're getting next season, because some things in this image doesn't make sense in the image, and it could be a teaser for that. The reason I'm showing this to you is because a lot of my comment section has been begging me to make a video on this every single day, every day I get at least 2 or 3 comments on the video saying Gogo, can you please talk about this? Do you think this means anything? And then I get a few DMs on Discord. I get a few people tagging me on Twitter saying, yo, Gogo, check this out. This means something. So recently it's gotten a snowball effect where a lot of people are asking me to talk about it. So I thought I'd talk about this. Whether you think this means something or not, let me know down below. I thought I'd show it to you because 100% in my opinion, the way that I look at this, and again, I could be definitely high saying it, these devs do not have the best marketing. For example, on screen right now, this was their marketing for Dobby. It was what is in front of his gaze, and it's Endeavor looking off in the distance, and I'm guessing in the distance was Dobby because the next day was Dobby's tweet of his gameplay. That was the marketing for Dobby. What's in his distance, or what's in his gaze, and it was Dobby. So just remember, that's the marketing you get with this game. It's not too great. So anything could be a hint towards something. I thought I'd show this to you because if this is a good hint, if this is a hint, it's the most clever hint ever, and it's kind of cool how they handled it. But let me know what you think. Again, it could mean nothing, could mean something. Let's hop into it. Like and subscribe. Let's hop over there. So first things first, to make this clear with you, this is the, if you don't know how this works, we have a gallery system in the game. The gallery system is pretty cool, actually. They give some things that they designed, some artworks that they drew themselves. For example, all these artworks over here are drawn by the devs themselves, and again, they always look really cool. They're some of my favorite artworks, unironically, for the game. I do like when we get these ones over here. Like, some of these are really cool. We've gotten a lot of cool ones recently with like Deku, Vigilante Deku. We had this one with Aizawa, this one over here, Vigilante Deku over here. We've had some good ones from like the anime itself, but it's really cool to get like our own stills from the game itself, and there's a lot of good ones in here. With the latest Season 6 ones that were just brand new, we had 2 brand new artworks. We had Decisive Battle, and we had Guard That Item Box. 2 brand new, again, gallery pieces that got added in. We had this one over here showing Overhaul fighting Miria, which is kind of cool because, again, it's paying homage to that of the fight where we had in the anime. Again, Mirio and Deku versus Overhaul. So, very cool one over here. But the one that a lot of people have been directing me to is this one over here. When I was making a thumbnail for this too, I actually originally saw this and I was wondering what the fudge it meant. But this is another wallpaper. It's called it's called Guard That Item Box. And in the image itself, if you were to look closely, there's 2 things to kind of point out here. If you look over here, there is fire, and in the fire you actually see feathers. And again, you might say this means nothing, which it could be. Let's be very honest here. But again, if you were to look at like the character roster in the game and think about whose feathers those are, Izuku Midoriya doesn't have feathers, Katsuki Bakugo doesn't have feathers, Ochako Uraraka doesn't have feathers, Tenya Ida doesn't have feathers, Shoto Todoroki has fire, so could this be, making a thing on Tenya Ida, or sorry, Todoroki's fire? Who knows? Asui, Kirishima, Momo, Denki, none of these characters here make any sense to be feathers. This makes sense to be fire, but again, this character plus another character make a lot of sense together with fire and feathers. We'll talk about that in a second. Mount Lady, Tomono Shigaraki, All For One, Dabi, Himiko Toga twice, Mr. Compress. The only character that technically makes sense here to have feathers is this one over here, because sometimes this thing is like feathers, but the thing is, how is the feathers in the fire and in, right in Cementos' face? It makes kind of no sense unless he got decked right in the face.
Second close. Divide. Final close. Divide. Counter.
結構頑張った方かな。迷いなんて終わりだ。覚悟しな。高くつくから。よさなり。耐えてみな。攻撃来てみなさいよ。これならしよだ。しびれろ。高くつくからね。そらよ。うまくかわせよ。それで終わり。これならしびれろ。それで終わり。それで終わり。
セカンドクローズリバイブ
それで終わり。
カウンター
それで終わり。見事見えております。高くつくかんだ。左
カウンター
高くつくかんだ。だが甘い。
カウンター
これなら近づく。これならそれで終わり。
カウンターブレイクダウン
そうだよ。見かけ倒しなやつ。いい目してるね。
ファーストクローズリバイブカウンター
いい攻撃。カウン
ターカウンターカウンターカウンター
高くつく。見えております。やるじゃん。
カウンター
高くつくからね。近づく。これだ。それで終わり。読めてます。
カウンター
これならしびれろ。こっちだよ。
カウンター
これなら下だ。しびれろ。覚悟しな。高速エアジェットだことって。よし。
セカンドクローズリバイブ
やるじゃん。甘い。バレバレ触るな。だが甘いよ。よくやる。耐えてみな。高く引いた。これならしびれろ。走れ。うまくかわせよ。
カウンタ
続ける。見え見え。受けて。これならそうだよ。走れ。走れ。見え来てみなさい。これならそれで終わり。それで終わり。しびれる。
ブレイクダウン
危なかったわ。
and feathers popped out of him like some Sonic coins, something like that. Again, it doesn't make sense the way it's like drawn here that his feathers got knocked out here, but it could be. It could be Overhaul, right? Overhaul doesn't per se shoot feathers though. It looks like he's again blocking against fire and feathers. So the thing that we kind of came to, obviously speaking, is that is Hawk's attack over there, again with the feathers and such. And again, you can 100% say that this is bullcrap and we're just like smoking crack here, which we definitely could be. Who knows, right? You don't know. But what I will say is this: it makes a lot of sense. Again, these devs suck at teasing, and sometimes a lot of random things end up meaning something. Like last season, the little birdie told us that there's a shop item coming, and in the end, Hawks came out the season after. So again, did they just do that early? Did they do that as some sort of marketing? Who freaking knows, dude? Some of their things are so weird on how they market the, stuff. I don't know for sure, but what I will show you is also this over here. Someone further took it here. So again, 23 days ago. Again, these posts weren't getting too much traction. Hawk's feather in the flames for again, Hawks for season 7. Over here could be Overhaul's feathers burning too, but that doesn't make sense. It doesn't, right? Like what, you decked him and then like Sonic coins fell out of him. In this case, its feathers fell out of him. You decked him so hard the feathers came out. And again, I could see people say that. I could see you say that this is the feathers thing, but again, it's like the way that it's angled, it's attacking the person. I don't see how it's his feathers unless he got decked so hard, man. Cementos really did it to him, and he flew back, and the feathers are there. Could be, but again, it's probably Hawks plus Endeavor, which makes a lot of sense. They also have a lot of quirk lines between each other, and if you've seen in the files, right, I think that it's both of them tag team a lot of quirk lines. Because again, in the anime, they're a pretty much duo. They're always together when they were fighting. In the latest arc, in the first arc when they met, it's always them fighting together. So it would be pretty cool. And then also, if you look at this comment, this person coached completely. Imagine it's just a tease for all the things coming next. Fire equals Shoto for season 6. Feathers equals Hawks for season 7, and Knives equals Toga for season 7. Which, by the way, Toga makes the most sense for season 7. She does. She makes the most sense for season 7. And if you were to just like sort of one-up it and be even more stupid about it, remember, Kaminari might be getting a skill set too. Soon, correct? And Kirishima might be getting a skill set soon too. It's just, you see how it all ended up? It's just funny because up and coming, this character is getting a skill set, so it could be his skill set. Up and coming, this is getting a skill set too. Up and coming, this is getting a skill set too. And then again, up and coming, we know that Hawk is coming, correct? It's just ironic how all that came out in this one image. I truly wonder if that is, again, a tease. And if it is a tease, damn good tease, by the way. But it's just funny, this image has everything that's coming soon. Cementos made a video about, he also has a skill set, but we can't, that's too far. He got leaked, like, again, afterwards, but we don't know his order at all. We know that these guys got leaked first. Remember, Toga, Kaminari, and Kirishima, so it could be Kaminari and Toga, could be Kirishima, Kaminari, and Hawks. That could also be the case, right? All these two characters here had the earliest leaks of a skill kit, and then over here, this, again, is the thing we expect next. It's an anniversary. It would make a lot of sense, right? So it's just funny how it ended up, but I am curious. Again, I don't know for sure. I wanted to show this to you. Again, I'm not trying to say this is 100%. And again, you can 100% say that we're on crack here. Real nice catch. This makes me wonder if this will be the way they tease characters going forward. I mean, the feathers are real random to put in a loading screen. Just like how Mina... What was this? Just like how Mina came after being in the gallery art too. Oh, wait. Mina has a gallery art? Really? Okay, maybe this whole video is dead right now. Maybe this whole video is dead right now. No. But that's all our gallery art, so she's not in the gallery art. Don't tell me they're talking about like this right here. Is Mina in the background? Is that what they're talking about? Oh, I am on the top. Oh, listen, don't count this. Don't count this, please. Please. That these are from the anime themselves. Obviously speaking, we're not getting these things. But where's Mina? Maybe she's in one of the game ones. Maybe this doesn't have all of them. Yeah, Mina's not drawn yet. Let's be honest here. Like, for example, we're not getting Selkie. We are getting her, but we're not getting her. So, yeah, no. Yeah, no. These are old artworks, plus they've been here forever. Second, the point of these things over here are from the anime themselves. So, yeah, there's not really much there to sort of go off of. But mainly, if you see Mina drawn in here, she's coming, bro. At that point, right? Because, again, this is their style, and this is who they have in game. Why are the feathers there? It just makes no sense to me. Like, putting the feathers there genuinely makes zero sense to me. Because it's like, whose feathers is it? Are you pretty much doing a good teaser here or a bad teaser? She isn't in any original artwork. The anime screenshots don't really count, 100%. Another reason to believe, and told you my delusions over here. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense, dude. It makes sense, honestly. You're all wrong, Tokiyami. Gotta wait 62 days, damn. Let me know what you think. Just wanted to show this to you again. We definitely could be smoking crack here. I wouldn't lie. Yeah, I could definitely see you say that. But, I am curious. A lot of people are pointing it out, and again, I finally decided to cover it as it's becoming a little bit more popular right now. So Well, not really. Let me be honest here. It's becoming popular before, but let me know what you think. All right, take care, have fun. That's been for me. That is the potential teaser for season 6 or 7. Sorry. I wonder if this is actually it. It would make a lot of sense, dude. Everything in the image shows it. Right, we're getting a new skill set from Kaminari Kirishima and the character for Hawks. If this was their teaser, I will never insult the devs again. Mark my words right now. Well, no, not really. I'll still insult them. Premium login hasn't returned. When that returns, and if this is true, then I won't insult the devs ever again. Okay, I'll apologize. I'll make a video and just say I'm sorry. The title of the video, I'm sorry, and then I apologize for 8 minutes of the video, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, depends how long they want me to say I'm sorry for. But bring back premium login and make this actually a good teaser. You win me over, right? But yeah, let me know what you think. Take care, have fun. That's been for me, and let me know what you think. All right.
All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on fine print tonight. 11 days ago, Ukraine made a pretty audacious move for the first time since the Second World War. A foreign army has breached the Russian borders. This bold move has not only caught Moscow off guard, but has also shattered the long-held assumption about the supposed red lines. And our next report gets you all the updates from the battlefield and the potential for escalation in this conflict.
Armed with Western weapons and a determination to turn the tables, Ukrainian forces continue to march into Russian territory. Ukraine's bold gambit in Kursk region has shattered the Kremlin's perceived invincibility. This unprecedented offensive is also seemingly erasing the much vaunted red lines drawn by Russia. The West, once cautious to a fault, now watches with tacit approval as Ukraine rewrites the rules of engagement. Russia rushed additional firepower and troops to contain the Ukraine incursion. These images released by Moscow shows a HIMARS firing missiles from Ukraine's Sumy region and then tries to run for cover. But Russian drone follows it, and soon the American-supplied missile launcher turns into a ball of flames. Ukraine claims control of seized 1,100 square kilometers of Russian territory, including the city of Sudzha. Meanwhile, Russia has reportedly redirected thousands of troops
戦士
走らしゃーくらえ
カウンター
動くしゃーしそらよ近づくしびれよ近づく
終わりか
これなら
終わり
そらよ
か
しびれよ
終わりか
そらよ
これは
耐えてみな超水サティスファクト
終わりか戦士カウンターせよ
やるじゃん
戦士よカウン
効かないねクソきた
カウンター
よし
セカンドクローズリバイドそれならしびれよ8番
耐えてみなこれならどこを見てそらよ
終わりか戦士
走れ
やはりな
走れそらよ
やはりな戦士
うまくかわせよそらよ
戦士
走れそらよ動くな
撃滅戦士戦士砕けよ
やるじゃん
戦士カブト割り出骨あり戦士や
そうか
戦士1番2番解放
やるじゃん触るな
戦士カブト割り
やるじゃんですが近づく
もう終わりファイナルクローズリバイド戦士8番
そらよ
そこだ戦士振るか戦士
うまくかわせよ
カウンター
焦ったそらよ走れ
戦士
走れ
そんなものか
そらよ
カウンター終わりかやんなあいないやはりな
耐えてみな続ける
まさかそんなものかしかったやんなせ戦士俺に耐えられるかカウント割りアゲト割り
やるじゃん
戦士しまった
やるじゃん
見事獅子奮陣の戦いであった武器ことのファーストクローズなおこの上にリバイド
走れ下だそらよ近づく
そこだ
どこを見てこうまくかわせよ
戦士
走れ近づく下だ
そんなものかカウンター終わりか
どこを見てこそらよ走れ
撃滅カウンター
甘いそらよ近づく走れうまくかわせよ
タイナシ
耐えてみな
やはりなやはりなカウンターまさかカウンターチェスト終わりかそんな来るか
そらようまくかわせよそらよ近づけ
そこだやはりなやるな見えたやはりなまだ戦えるぞセカンドクローズリバイドいないラム8番ラム8番これは戦 カウンター通り戦士カブト割りやるな古くやはりなそんなものか撃滅戦士なかなかそんなものかカウンターカウンター戦士戦士
ほらどうした
終わりかブレイクダウン
大したことなくて助かったわ。フォーナン様がお相手だ。覚悟しろ。そうだよ。
そこだ
そうだよ。そうだよ。
やはりな戦士
走れ。
そんなもの離れる
発動庫を見てる。そこだ。
やるなバカだ
これなら
やるな
とどめ。
カウンター戦士
下がる。そうだよ。くらえ。
終わりか戦士なかなかカウンター
走れ。そうだよ。そうだよ。下だ。
戦士カウンターいか
そうだ。ここだ。まだいける。
セカンドクローズディバイド
しびれろ。そうだよ。走れ。そうだよ。
戦士大阪
くらえ。走れ。
見えた足りぬそんなものか
これならしびれろ。
乗れる
そうだよ。そうだよ。
バカだ戦士
そうだよ。走れ。そうだよ。これなら
ほう
八角ってやつ。ちょっともらい。
戦士
続ける。下がる。下がる。下がる。下がる。かわいがってやるよ。大したことなくて助かったわ。
troops from occupied Ukrainian territories to counter the offensive, a move that could strain its broader offensive.
So we have seen some Russian units be redirected from operations in Ukraine towards the Kursk area. These are just early reports, so I can't really say with certainty the numbers or, their objectives, but we have seen some movement.
Ukraine's bold gambit has not only challenged Russia militarily, but has also forced a reconsideration of the war's fundamental dynamics. The erasure of previously sacrosanct red lines carries severe escalation risks, leaving both sides and the international community navigating uncharted and perilous waters. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what this moment is playing out as part of this Kursk incursion, we're being joined by Mr. Maximilian Hess, who is a Central Asia Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and author of Economic War, Ukraine and the Global Conflict Between Russia and the West. He's joining us live from London. Mr. Hess, let me in fact start off by asking you with some reports that have quite clearly pointed out to the use of the British-donated Challenger 2 tanks that are being used by the Ukrainians in carrying out this incursion into Kursk. How is the British government looking at a potential fallout for the fact that Ukraine is using these British-given weapons? Is Britain willing to accept any ramifications that may result out of an escalation?
Well, certainly, and thank you very much for having me. What is clear is it's not just British tanks that have been used, U.S. Stryker vehicles, German Marauder tanks as well. Canada acknowledged today that some Canadian equipment had come out, and the Canadians said very clearly that we don't place any geographic restrictions on the Ukrainians. Other countries have been much more circumspect. In Germany, there's been a very lively debate about it. Here in the UK, they've been relatively clear. But I think that this is not likely to result in any kind of direct escalation from Russia. Russia certainly has carried out intelligence, even sabotage activity in NATO countries in the course of this conflict, but I don't expect that this will lead to a direct retaliation from Russia, certainly not against the West.
The Russians would of course turn around and say that because these countries are giving weapons that are being used on Russian territory against Russia, the logistical transport facilities of transporting these weapons could be targeted before they're brought into Ukraine. How do the Western nations respond to that?
Well, in some ways, it's kind of the boy who cried wolf phenomenon. This isn't the first time the Russians have said this. They've also made a lot of noise around nuclear escalation. The more and more you use those threats, the more meaningless it is. But also there's been an increased acknowledgement, and we've seen this through reporting, citing intelligence sources, of just the extent of Russian activity in Europe. We saw this just now with the prisoner swap for...
自分を眺めてみたら、この姿って目立ちすぎるよね。正直に答えて、なんだか恥ずかしくなってきちゃって。なんかよくよく自分を眺めてみたら、この
been sentenced to death, and the Kremlin had denied it. Of course, now they've admitted it, treated him to a hero's welcome. So there's more of an acknowledgement publicly that Russia already has carried out deadly attacks on the West, unperceived political enemies, including a bombing campaign in Spain last year.
All right, and also the fact that, Ukraine has in fact come forth and said that the reason why it has carried out the incursion into Kursk is to force the Russians to negotiate on fair terms. Do you think when the negotiations are held in the wake of the Kursk incursion, the Russians will be willing to negotiate with the Ukrainians on what Ukraine sees as fair terms?
So no, I certainly don't think the Russians are likely to do that, and I think Putin is still very far away from negotiations, and those have to be negotiations from a position of strength, because otherwise Putin will just use them to build time to attack again. We've seen very clearly from the beginning of this war, when he launched it, his aims are to take Kiev, Kharkiv, Zaporozhye, Odessa. These are cities with millions more people than in the territory Russia currently occupies, all the way up to the main river, the Dnieper that bisects Ukraine, and taking the entire south. And those agendas and operations will continue, sadly.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hess, for joining us and getting his dark perspective.
Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
フォーナン様がお相手だ。覚悟しな。ファーストクローズリバイトカウンターセカンドクローズリバイトカウンターカウンターそんなものかファイナルクローズリバイト終わりか 国の鬼となりぬ。
行くよ無に
なおこの上に積もれかしリバイブ
走れ走れ走れくらえ
最後
そら
決定
くらえ
そこだ絶好だ
走れ
勝つぞ使うなそこだやんな終わりか使うな
しびれろ揺れてみないいだろでこれなら気持ちいいなそらよそらよ
セカンドクローズリバイブ
そこだ
終わりか
やるじゃんあれだ近づく力近づく
戦士戦士戦士やんな
しびれろ
はっバカだ戦士カウンターカウンター
これが近づく
撃滅
や走れ
終わりかアギトワリそこだ発射
殺したそうか来い
戦士
こうか
チェストもう終わりファイナルクローズリバイブカウンター
近づく
カウンター
覚悟しな高速ピラティチューだ死ね
やんな
走れ
終わりかカウンター戦士チェストカウンターチェスト
やるじゃん
戦士バット戦士
バレバレ
テックヒットアギトワリ
力を合わせた
絶好だ
やるじゃんバレバレ
アギトワリ
近づ
絶好だ全国間解放青クリシュ見事獅子奮迅の戦いである
Who's behind it? Who knows what? Some sort of operation. What, you know? Who knows who was behind it? Who knows what was the motivation? But it will pull off this thing.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What are the consequences? They were able to pull off this thing. This some sort of operation. What, you know? Who knows who was behind it? Who knows what was the motivation? But it clearly has something to do with compromising people, which is an age-old strategy for getting people to do what you want them to do. You have things on them, you use those things as leverage, and then next thing you know, you've got people saying things that you want them to say, and it moves policy, changes things, get things done. That they did that.
Yes.
And and we know they did that, and yet no one is asking for the tapes, no one's asking for the client list. We're in the dark. Still.
And probably, I don't know, man. I spent too much time thinking about all the Epstein variants. It probably the sex stuff is overdone and everything else is underdone. It's like a limited hangout. We get to talk about the crazy underage sex, and you know, not about all the other questions. It's like when Alex Acosta testified for Labor Secretary, and he was the DA who prosecuted Epstein in 08, 09, and got him sort of the very light 13-month or whatever sentence. And it was a South Florida DA or whatever he was. And Acosta was asked, you know, why did he get off so easily? And under congressional testimony, when he was up for Labor Secretary 2017, it was he belonged to intelligence. That's
yeah.
And then you know, and so it's the question isn't about the sex with the underage women. The question is really about, you know, why was he so protected? And then, you know, I went down all these rabbit holes. Was he, you know, working for the Israelis or Mossad or all this sort of stuff? And I've come to think that was very secondary. It was obviously it was just the U.S. You know, if you're working for Israel, you don't get protected. And we had Jonathan Pollard. He went to jail for 25 years or whatever.
But unrelated, right?
Understood, but this
is one particular operation.
It was if it was an intelligence operation, the question we should be asking is what part of the U.S. intelligence system was he working for? Was he working for, you know?
But don't you think that's an effective strategy for controlling politicians? Getting them involved in sex scandals? I mean, that's always been one of the worst things that can happen to a politician. Look at Monica Lewinsky. A very simple one. Consensual, inappropriate sexual relationship between a president and a staffer, and it almost takes down the presidency. It causes him to get impeached. Powerful motivators. The shame of it all, also the illegal activity, the fact that it's one of the most disgusting things that we think of, people having sex with underage people.
I'm sure that was part of it. I suspect there are a lot of other questions that you know, one should also
most
ask.
certainly. But I would think that is one of the best motivators that we have, is having dirt on people like that, especially something that could ruin your career, especially people that are deeply embedded in this system of people knowing things about people and using those at their advantage. I mean, that's an age-old strategy in politics. That was J. Edgar Hoover's entire modus operandi.
Yeah, but my riff on it is always that it's a little bit different from the J. Edgar Hoover thing, and the question was always whether the people doing it knew they were getting compromised. And so it's the vibe. It's not that you somehow got compromised. It was more you were joining this secret club.
Right.
You got to be made.
Yeah.
You're a made man in the mafia.
And you get to do crazy things.
No. only if we have compromise on you do you get ahead.
Right.
It's like, it's like, I don't know, it's one of these
Skull and
the
Bones
closet, the closet of the Vatican. Claim is 80% of the cardinals in the Catholic Church are gay. Not sure if that's true, but directionally it's probably correct. And the basic thesis is you don't get promoted to a cardinal if you're straight, because we need to have, and so we need to be compromised, and then you're under control, but you also get ahead.
Completely makes sense. Completely makes sense in the way to do that, with especially with all these politicians who are essentially like bad actors. A lot of them, they're just people that want power and people that want control. A lot of them, and those kind of guys, they want to party. I mean, that has been. You've got two types of leaders that are presidents. You've got pussy hounds and warmongers. And sometimes you have both, but generally you don't. Guys like Clinton and JFK were anti-war, and then you have guys like Bush, who you don't think of at all as a pussy hound, but most certainly you think of as a warmonger.
Do you, what do you have a theory on what was Bill Gates' complicity with Epstein?
I think he likes pussy. I think he's a man. I think he likes power. He likes monopoly. I mean, he's incredibly effective with Microsoft, and for the longest time, he was thought of as a villain, right? He was this antitrust villain. He was this guy who was monopolizing this operating system and controlling just this incredible empire, and he had a real bad rap. And then I think he wisely turned towards philanthropy. And
do you think that he needed Epstein?
I think it's very difficult for a very famous, very high-profile person to fuck around. I think it's very difficult. I think you have to worry about people telling people. You worry about it taking you down if you're having affairs. If you're running some philanthropy organization, you're supposed to be thought of as this guy who's like this wonderful person who's trying to really fix all the problems in the world, but really you're just flying around and banging all these different chicks. You have to figure out a way to pull that off. And this is what Eric Weinstein and we've had discussions about this, and Eric's position is that there are people in this world that can provide experiences for you and safely for people that are in that kind of a group. And that makes sense. It makes sense that if you pay people enough and you have people motivated in order to establish these relationships and make sure that these things happen, when you get very high profile, you can't just be on a fucking dating app. And if you're a guy who likes to bang chicks, what are you going to do?
All of that might be true, but I wonder if there are more straightforward alternate conspiracy theories on Epstein that we're missing. So let me do an alternate one on Bill Gates, where the things, just looking at what's hiding in plain sight. He supposedly talked to Epstein early on about how his marriage wasn't doing that well.
嫌いじゃないね。
And then Epstein suggested that he should get a divorce, circa 2010, 2011. And Gates told him something like, that doesn't quite work. He didn't have, presumably because he didn't have a prenup. So, so there's one part of Epstein as a marriage counselor, which is sort of disturbing. But then the second thing that we know that that Gates talked to Epstein about was sort of all this sort of collaborating on funding, setting up this philanthropy, all this sort of this somewhat corrupt left-wing philanthropy structures. And so there's a question, does, and then my sort of straightforward alternate conspiracy theory is should we combine those two? And was there, and I don't have all the details on this figured out, but it would be something like, Bill and Melinda get married in 1994. They don't sign a prenup, and something's going wrong with the marriage, and maybe Melinda can get half the money. In a divorce, he doesn't want her to get half the money. What do you do? And then the alternate plan is something like you commit the marital assets to this nonprofit, and then it sort of locks Melinda into not complaining about the marriage for a long, long time. And it's some kind of a and so there's something about the left-wing philanthropy world that was it was some sort of boomer way to control their crazy wives or something like this.
And that's also an effective way to whitewash your past, right? Your thought.
Sure, there are all
this.
these. And he talked to Epstein about. He got Epstein to meet with the head of the Nobel Prize Foundation. So it was, Bill Gates wanted to get a Nobel Prize.
Wow.
Right. So this is all straightforward. This is all known.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying what you're saying about.
Do you know the history of the Nobel Prize? That's the ultimate whitewash.
Sure, it was for inventing dynamite.
Yeah, that's well, Peter Berg told me the story. I was blown away. He originally, someone said that he died, and it was printed that he died, but he didn't die. And in the stories, they were calling him the Merchant of Death, because he was the guy that invented dynamite. And he realized that, oh my God, this is my reputation. This is how people think about me. I have to do something to turn this around. So he invented the Nobel Prize, and he started. Then now, the name Nobel is automatically connected in most people's eyes to the greatest people amongst us, the people that have contributed the most to society and science and art and peace and all these different things. Nobel Prize for Medicine. Or
It's a super crazy history.
Yeah, it's a crazy history, but it's the ultimate whitewash. It's the same thing. Like, he came up with that prize because he wanted to change his image publicly.
And
so it's ironic that Bill Gates would want to get a Nobel Prize.
or not ironic, or it's ironic, but
straightforward,
understandable and ironic.
Yeah.
But I think, but then if and so there's a underage sex version of the Epstein story, and then there is a crazy status Nobel Prize history of it, and there is a corrupt left-wing philanthropy one, and there is a boomers who didn't sign prenuptial agreements with their wives story,
right?
And I think all of those are worth exploring more.
I think you're right. That's
all I'm saying.
What about these left-wing philanthropy ventures do you think is uniquely corrupt?
Sorry, which one do I think is most corrupt, or what?
No, what about them? These when you said corrupt?
Yeah. Well, man, it's there's something about maybe it's just my hermeneutic of suspicion. But there's something about, there's something about the virtue signaling, and what does it mean? And I always think this is sort of a America versus Europe difference, where in America we're told that that philanthropy is something a good person does, and if you're a Rockefeller and you start giving away all your money, this is just what a good person does, and it shows how good you are. And then I think sort of the European intuition on it is something like, wow, that's only something a very evil person does. And if you start giving away all your money in Europe, it's like, Joe, you must have murdered somebody. You must be covering up for someone. And so there are these two very different intuitions, and I think the European one is more correct than the American one. And probably there's some history where, the sort of left-wing philanthropy peaked in 2007, 2010, 2012, and there's these subtle ways, we've become more European in our sensibilities as a society, and so it has this very different valence from what it did 12 or 14 years ago. But it's all we ask all these questions like we're asking right now about Bill Gates, where it's like, okay, he was like all the testimony in the Microsoft antitrust trial in the 90s, where it's like he's cutting off the air supply, he wants to strangle people, and he's kind of a sociopathic guy, it seems. And then it's this giant whitewashing operation, and then somehow the whitewashing has been made too transparent, and it gets deconstructed and exposed by the internet or whatever.
But I think most people are still unaware of how much whitewashing actually took place, including donating somewhere in the neighborhood of $300+ million to media corporations.
Podcast.
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Glad to be on the show.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. What's cracking? How you doing?
Doing all right.
We were
Doing
just
all right.
talking about how you're still trapped in L.A.
I'm still trapped in L.A. I know.
You're friends with a lot of people out here. Have you thought about jettisoning?
I talk about it all the time, and but you know, it's always talk is often a substitute for action. It's always does it
Right.
lead to action or does it
Right.
end up substituting for action? And
That's a good point.
But I have endless conversations about leaving. I moved from San Francisco to LA back in 2018. That felt about as big a move away as possible, and I keep the extreme thing I keep saying, and again, I have to keep in mind talk is a substitute for action. The extreme thing I keep saying is I can't decide whether to leave the state or the country.
Oh boy!
And
if you went out of the country, where would you go?
Man, I've it's tough to find places because you know, there are a lot of problems in the U.S. and most places are doing so much worse.
Yeah.
So
it's not a good move to leave here.
But
as fucked up as this place is.
But I keep thinking I shouldn't move twice. So I can't decide whether I should move to Florida or should move to New
Costa
Zealand
Rica.
or Costa Rica or something like that.
Yeah. We go full John McAfee.
And so but can't decide between those two. So I end up stuck in California.
Well, Australia is okay, but they're even worse when it comes to rule of law and what they decide to make you do, and the way they're cracking down on people now for online speech, and it's very sketchy in other countries.
But somehow the relative outperformance of the U.S. and the absolute stagnation decline of the U.S. they're actually related things, because the way the conversation's grouped, every time I tell someone, I'm thinking about leaving the country, they'll do what you say, and they'll say, well, every place is worse, and then that somehow distracts us from all the problems in this country, and then we can't talk about what's gone wrong in the U.S. because everything's so much worse.
Well, I think most people know what's gone wrong, but they don't know if they're on the side of the government that's currently in power. They don't know how to criticize it. They don't know exactly what to say, what should be done.
Right.
And they're ideologically connected to this group being correct.
Right.
So they try to do mental gymnastics to try to support some of the things that are going on. I think that's part of the problem. I don't think it's necessarily that we don't know what the problems are. We know what the problems are, but we don't have clear solutions as to how to fix them, nor do we understand the real mechanisms of how they got there in the first place.
Yeah, there are a lot that are pretty obvious to articulate, and they're much easier to describe than solve. Like, we have a crazy budget deficit.
Yeah.
And presumably you have to do one of three things. You have to raise taxes a lot, you have to cut spending a lot, or you're just going to keep borrowing money.
Isn't there like some enormous amount of our taxes that just go to the deficit?
It's not that high, but it's gone up a lot. And
what is it? I thought it was like 34%.
It peaked at 3.1% of GDP, which is maybe 15-20% of the budget. It peaked at 3.1% of GDP in 1991, and then it went all the way down to something like 1.5% in the mid 2010s, and now it's crept back up to 3.2%, and so we are at all-time highs as a percentage of GDP. And the way to understand the basic math is the debt went up a crazy amount, but the interest rates went down. And from 2008 to 2021, for 13 years, we basically had zero interest rates with one brief blip under Powell, but it was basically zero rates. And then you could borrow way more money, and it wouldn't show up in servicing the debt because you just paid 0% interest on the T-bills. And the thing that's very dangerous, seeming to me, about the current fiscal situation is the interest rates have gone back to positive, like they were in the 90s and early 2000s, mid 2000s, and it's just this incredibly large debt, and so we now have a real runaway deficit problem. But people have been talking about this for 40 years, and crying wolf for 40 years, so it's very hard for people to take it seriously.
Most people don't even understand what it means. Like when you say there's a deficit, we owe money. Okay, to who? How's that work? It's people who bought the bonds, and it's a lot of it's to Americans. Some of them are held by the Federal Reserve. Decent amount are held by foreigners at this point, because it's in some ways it's the opposite of the trade current account deficits. The U.S. has been running these big current account deficits, and then the foreigners end up with way more dollars than they want to spend on American goods or services, and so they have to reinvest them in the U.S. Some put it into houses or stocks, but a lot of it just goes into the government debt. So in some ways it's a function of the chronic trade imbalances, chronic trade deficits. Well, if you had supreme power, if Peter Thiel was the ruler of the world and you could fix this, what would you do?
Man, I always find that hypothetical. It's a ridiculous hypothetical.
It is ridiculous.
Hypotheticals, you get ridiculous answers.
I want a ridiculous answer. That's what I like. But what could be done? Like, what could be done? First of all, what could be done to mitigate it? And what could be done to solve it?
I think my answers are probably all in the very libertarian direction. So it would be sort of figure out ways to have smaller governments, figure out ways, to increase the age on Social Security, means test Social Security so not everyone gets it. Just figure out ways to gradually dial back, a lot of these government benefits. And then that's insanely unpopular. So it's completely unrealistic on that level.
That bothers people that need Social Security.
Well, I said means tested.
Means tested, so people who don't need it don't get it.
Right.
So Social Security, like, even if you're very wealthy, I don't even know how it works. Do you still get it?
Yeah, basically pretty much everyone gets it because it was originally rationalized as sort of a pension system, not as a welfare system. And so the fiction was you pay Social Security taxes, and then you're entitled to get a pension out in the form of Social Security.
Right.
And because it was told as fiction that it was a form of the pension system instead of an intergenerational Ponzi scheme or something like that. The fiction means everybody gets paid Social Security because of the pension system. Whereas if we were more honest and said it's just a welfare system, maybe you could start dialing. You could probably rationalize in a lot of ways.
And it's not related to how much you put into it, right? Like, how does Social Security work?
I think it's partially related. So I think there is. I'm not a total expert on this stuff, but I think there's some guaranteed minimum you get, and then if you put more in, you get somewhat more, and then it's capped at a certain amount.
And then
that's why Social Security taxes are capped at something like $150,000 a year. And then this is one of the really big tax increase proposals that's out there is to uncap it, which would effectively be a 12.4% income tax hike. On all your income.
On just to Social Security?
Sure, because the argument is the sort of progressive left Democrat argument is that it's why should you have a regressive Social Security tax? Why should you pay 12.4% or whatever the Social Security tax is, which half gets paid by you, half gets paid by your employer, but then it's capped at like 140, 150K, so some level like that. And what should be regressive, where if you make 500K or $1 million a year, you pay zero tax under marginal income. And that makes no sense if it's a welfare program. If it's a retirement savings program and your payout's capped, then if you don't need to put in more than you get out.
Well, that's logical, but there's not a lot of logic going on with the way people are talking about taxes today. Like California just jacked their taxes up to 14, what? Was it 14.4?
Something like that, yeah. 14.3, I think.
Which is
maybe more, yeah. 49, something, yeah.
I mean, you want more money for doing a terrible job and having more people leave for the first time ever in like the history of the state.
Yeah, but it gets away with it.
I know.
And
well,
so
people are forced with no choice. What are you going to do?
It is. I mean, there are people at the margins who leave, but the state government still collects more and more in revenue. So it's you get 10% more revenues, and 5% of the people leave. You still increase the amount of revenues you're getting. It's inelastic enough that you're actually able to increase the revenues. I mean, this is sort of the crazy thing about California is there's always sort of a right-wing or libertarian critique of California that it's such a ridiculous place. It should just collapse under its own ridiculousness, and it doesn't quite happen. The macroeconomics are pretty good. 40 million people. The GDP's around $4 trillion. It's about the same as Germany with 80 million, or Japan with 125 million. Japan has 3 times the population of California. Same GDP means 1/3 the per capita GDP. So there's some level in which California as a whole is working, even though it doesn't work from the government's point of view, it doesn't work for a lot of the people who live there. And the rough model I have for how to think of California is that it's kind of like Saudi Arabia. And you have a crazy religion, wokeism in California, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. Not that many people believe it, but it distorts everything. And then you have like oil fields in Saudi Arabia, and you have the big tech companies in California, and the oil pays for everything. And then you have a completely bloated, inefficient government sector. And you have sort of all sorts of distortions in the real estate market, where people also make lots of money. Sort of the government and real estate are ways you redistribute the oil wealth, or the big tech money in California. And it's not the way you might want to design a system from scratch, but it's pretty stable. People have been saying Saudi Arabia is ridiculous. It's going to collapse any year now. They've been saying that for 40 or 50 years. But if you have a giant oil field, you can pay for a lot of ridiculousness. I think that's the way you have to think of California.
Well, the other thing is there are
things about it that are ridiculous, but there's something about it that it doesn't naturally self-destruct overnight.
Well, there's a lot of kick-ass people there, and there's a lot of people that are still generating enormous amounts of wealth there, and it's too difficult to just pack up and leave.
Yeah, I think it's something like 4 of the 8 or 9 companies with market capitalizations over $1 trillion are based in California. So
that's amazing.
It's Google, Apple, now Nvidia, Meta. I think Broadcom's close to that.
And there's no ideal place to live either. It's not like California sucks, so there's a place that's got it totally dialed in, with also that has an enormous GDP, also has an enormous population. There's not like one big city that's really dialed in.
Well, there are things that work. So I looked at all the zero tax states in the U.S. and it's always, the way you ask the question gets at it, which is, you don't live in in theory, a lot of stuff happens on a state level, but you don't live in a state, you live in a city. And so if you're somewhat biased towards living in at least a moderately sized city, I think there are 4 states where there are no cities: Alaska, Wyoming, South Dakota, New Hampshire. There's zero tax, but no cities to speak of. And then you have Washington State with Seattle. where the weather is the worst in the country. You have Nevada with Las Vegas, which I'm not that big a fan of. And then that leaves three zero-tax states. You have Texas, which I like as a state, but I'm not that big a fan of Austin, Dallas, or Houston. And it's a sort of Houston, just sort of an oil town, which is good if you're in that business, but otherwise not. Dallas has sort of an inferiority complex to LA and New York. Just not the healthiest attitude. And then, I don't know, Austin's a government town and a college town and a wannabe hipster San Francisco town. So, my book's sort of 3 strikes and you're kind of out too. And then that leaves Nashville, Tennessee, and then or Miami, South Florida. And those would be my 2 top choices.
Miami's fun, but I wouldn't want to live there. It's a fun place to visit. It's a little too crazy, a little too chaotic, a little too cocaine fueled, a little too party.
I think it's pretty segmented from the tourist strip from everything else. It probably is. There probably is something a little bit paradoxical about any place that gets lots of tourists, where it's in some sense of the Cape. There's some things that are great about it because so many tourists go, but then in some sense, it creates a weird aesthetic because the day-to-day vibe is that you don't work and you're just having fun or something like that.
Right, because so many people are going there just to do that.
And that's probably a little bit off with South Florida, the South Florida thing. But I think it's and then I think Nashville is also sort of its own real place.
Nashville's great. Yeah.
So those are the top 2.
I could live in Nashville, no problem. Yeah.
I'm always too. 5th grade onward since 77 I lived in California, and so I'm just a sucker for the weather, and I think there is no place besides coastal California would have really good weather year-round in the U.S. Maybe Hawaii's pretty good.
Coastal California is tough to beat.
And
you're 2 hours from the mountains.
Man, it's like it's mid-August here in Austin. It's just brutal.
Is it?
I think so.
Really? That was too hot for you?
It was too hot.
Today's mild. What is it out there? Like 80?
All right.
85? 96?
You're proving my point.
I do so much sauna that I literally don't even notice it. I'm outside for hours every day shooting arrows, and I don't even notice it.
Well, that's I don't know if you're a representative of the average Austin resident.
I don't know, but I think you get accustomed to it. To me, it's so much better than too cold. Too cold, you can die. And I know you can die from the heat, but you probably won't. Especially if you have water. You'll be okay. But you could die from the cold. Cold's real. So really cold places, there's 5 months out of the year where your life's in danger. Where you could do something wrong. Like if you live in Wyoming and you break down somewhere and there's no one on the road, you could die out there. That's real. You could die from exposure.
Sure, there's probably some very deep reason there's been a net migration of people to the west and the south in the U.S. over
California, you can do no
decades.
wrong. As long as the earth doesn't move, you're good. As long as there's no tsunamis, you're good. It is a perfect environment, virtually year-round. It gets a little hot in the summer, but again, coastal, not at all. If you get an 80-degree day in Malibu, it's unusual. It's wonderful.
Right.
You got a beautiful breeze coming off the ocean. Sun's out. Everybody's pretty.
And then it's correlated with confiscatory taxation.
Yes,
it's all sort of a package deal.
Well, it's a scam. They know you don't want to leave. I didn't want to leave California. It's fucking great.
I appreciate you left. I always have the fantasy that if enough people like you leave, it'll put pressure on them. But it's never quite enough.
Never quite enough, and it's not going to be. It's too difficult for most people. It was very difficult for me, and I had a bunch of people working for me that were willing to pack up and leave, like young Jamie over there. But it was tricky. You're taking your whole business, and my business is talking to people. That's part of my business. My other business is stand-up comedy.
So you left during COVID, or?
I left at the very beginning. As soon as they started locking things down, I'm like, oh, these motherfuckers are never letting us go.
April, May 2020?
In May, I started looking at houses.
Cool.
That's when I came to Austin first.
I got a place in Miami in September of 2020, and spent the last 4 winters there. So I'm sort of always on the cusp of moving to Florida. Hard to get out of California. But the thing that's gotten a lot harder about moving relative to 4 years ago, and I'd say, I think my real estate purchases have generally not been great over the years, and they've done okay, but certainly not the way I've been able to make money at all. But with the one exception was Miami. Bought it in September 2020, and probably fast forward 4 years, it's up like 100%.
Wow.
Or something like that, and then paradoxically, this also means it's gotten much harder to move there or Austin or any of these places. If you if I relocated my office in LA, the people who own houses, you have to buy a place in Florida. It costs twice as much as it did 4 years ago, and then the interest rates have also doubled. So you get a 30-year mortgage. You could have locked that in for 3% in 2020. Now it's maybe 6.5%, 7%.
Oof.
So the prices have doubled, the mortgages have doubled, so it costs you 4 times as much to buy a house. And so, so there was a moment where people could move during COVID, and it's gotten dramatically harder relative to what it was 4 years ago.
Well, the Austin real estate market went crazy, and then it came back down a little bit. And it's in that down a little bit spot right now, where there's a lot of like high-end properties that are still for sale. They can't move. It's different, there's not a lot of people moving here now like there was in the boom, because everything's open everywhere.
Well, I somehow think Austin was linked to California, and Miami was linked a little bit more to New York. And it was a little bit, all these differences, but Austin was kind of, a big part of the move were people from tech, from California, that moved to Austin. There's a part of the Miami, South Florida thing, which was people from finance in New York City that moved to Florida. And the finance industry is less networked on New York City. So I think it is possible for people, if you run a private equity fund, or if you work at a bank, it's possible for some of those functions to easily be moved to a different state. The tech industry is crazily networked on California. Like there's probably some way to do it. It's not that easy.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense too. It's just the sheer numbers. I mean, when you're talking about all those corporations that are established and based in California, there's so many. They're so big. Just the sheer numbers of human beings that live there and work there that are involved in tech.
Sure, but if it wasn't as networked, you could probably just move. And maybe these things are networked till they're not. Detroit was very networked. The car industry was super networked on Detroit for decades and decades, and Michigan got more and more mismanaged, and people thought the network sort of protected them because, the big 3 car companies were in Detroit, but then you had all the supply chains were also in Detroit. And then eventually it was just so ridiculous. People moved, started moving the factories outside of that area, and it sort of unraveled. So that's, it can also happen with California. It'll just take a lot.
That would be insane if they just abandoned all the tech companies in California. I mean, just look at what happened at Flint, Michigan, when all the auto factories pulled out.
Well, look, I think you can, and there are all these paradoxical histories. The internet, the point of the internet, in some sense, was to eliminate the tyranny of place. And that was sort of the idea. And then one of the paradoxes about the history of the internet was that the internet companies, were all centered in California. And there have been different waves of how networked, how non-networked they were. I think probably 2021, sort of the COVID moving away from California. The big thing in tech was crypto, and crypto had this conceit of a alternate currency, decentralized, away from the central banks, but also the crypto companies, the crypto protocols. You could do those from anywhere. You could do them outside the U.S. You could do them from Miami, and so crypto was something where the tech could naturally move out of California, and today probably the the core tech narrative is completely flipped to AI, and then there's something about AI that's very centralized. I had this one-liner years ago where it was if we say that crypto is libertarian, can we also say that AI is communist, or something like this, where the natural structure for an AI company looks like it's a big company, and then somehow the AI stuff feels like it's going to be dominated by the big tech companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so if that's the future of tech,
yeah,
the scale, the natural scale of the San Francisco Bay Area. And so if that's the future of tech,
yeah,
the scale, the natural scale of the industry tells you that it's going to be extremely hard to get out of the San Francisco Bay Area.
When you look to the future and you try to just make a guess as to how all this is going to turn out with AI, what do you think we're looking at over the next 5 years?
Man, I think I should start by being modest in answering that question and saying that nobody has a clue.
Right, which is true. Which pretty much all the experts say.
I would say, let me do sort of a history. The riff I always had on this was that I can't stand any of the buzzwords, and I felt AI. There's all this big data, cloud computing. There were all these crazy buzzwords people had, and they always were ways to sort of abstract things and get away from reality somehow, and were not good ways of talking about things. And I thought AI was this incredible abstraction because it can mean the next generation of computers, it can mean the last generation of computers, it can mean anything in between. And if you think about the AI discussion in the 2010s, pre-OpenAI, ChatGPT, and the revolution of the last 2 years, but the 2010s AI discussion, maybe it was, so I'll start with the history before I get to the future, but the history of it was maybe anchored on two visions of what AI meant. And one was Nick Bostrom, Oxford prof, who wrote this book, Super Intelligence, 2014. And it was basically AI was going to be this super duper intelligent thing, way godlike intelligence, way smarter than any human being. And then there was sort of the CCP, Chinese Communist rebuttal, the Kai-Fu Lee book from 2018, AI Superpowers. And I think the subtitle was something like The Race for AI Between Silicon Valley and China, or something like this. And it was sort of, it defined AI as, it was fairly low tech. It was just surveillance, facial recognition technology. We would just have this sort of totalitarian Stalinist monitoring. It didn't require very much innovation. It just required that you apply things. And basically the subtext was China is going to win because we have no ethical qualms in China about applying this sort of basic machine learning to sort of measuring or controlling the population. And those were sort of like, say, two extreme competing visions of what AI would mean in the 2010s, and that sort of maybe were sort of the anchors of the AI debate. And then what happened in some sense with ChatGPT in late 22, early 23 was that the achievement you got, you did not get super intelligence. It was not just surveillance tech, but it was you actually got to the holy grail of what people would have defined AI as from 1950 to 2010. For the previous 60 years, before the 2010s, people have always said AI, the definition of AI is passing the Turing test. And the Turing test, it basically means that the computer can fool you into thinking that it's a human being. And it's a somewhat fuzzy test because, obviously you can have an expert on the computer, a non-expert. It's, does it fool you all the time or some of the time? How good is it? But to first approximation, the Turing test, we weren't even close to passing it in 2021, and then ChatGPT basically passes the Turing test, at least for let's say an IQ 100 average person. It's passed the Turing test, and that was the holy grail. That was the holy grail of AI research for the previous 60 years. And so there's probably some psychological or sociological history where you can say that this weird debate between Bostrom about superintelligence and Kai-Fu Lee about surveillance tech was like this almost like psychological suppression people had, where they were not thinking, they lost track of the Turing test, of the holy grail, because it was about to happen. And it was such a significant, such an important thing that you didn't even want to think about it. So I'm tempted to give almost a psychological repression theory of the 2010 debates. But be that as it may, the Turing test gets passed, and that's an extraordinary achievement. And then, maybe, and then where does it go from here? There probably are ways you can refine these. It's still going to be a long time to apply it. There's a question. There's this AGI discussion. Will we get artificial general intelligence, which is a hopelessly vague concept, which general intelligence could be just a generally smart human being. So is that just a person with an IQ of 130? Or is it super intelligence? Is it godlike intelligence? So it's sort of an ambiguous thing. But I keep thinking that maybe the AGI question's less important than passing the Turing test. If we got AGI, if we got, let's say, super intelligence, that would be interesting to Mr. God, because you'd have competition for being God. But surely the Turing test is more important for us humans, because it's either a complement or a substitute to humans, and so it's going to rearrange the economic, cultural, political structure of our society in extremely dramatic ways. And I think maybe what's already happened is much more important than anything else that's going to be done. And then it's just going to be a long ways in applying it. One last thought. The AI discussion in the 2010s, pre-OpenAI to easily be moved to a different state, the tech industry is crazily networked on California. Like there's probably some way to do it. It's not that easy.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense too. It's just the sheer numbers. I mean, when you're talking about all those corporations that are established and based in California, there's so many. They're so big. Just the sheer numbers of human beings that live there and work there that are involved in tech.
Sure, but if it wasn't as networked, you could probably just move, and maybe these things are networked till they're not. Detroit was very networked. The car industry was super networked on Detroit for decades and decades, and Michigan got more and more mismanaged, and people thought the network sort of protected them because, the big 3 car companies were in Detroit, but then you had all the supply chains were also in Detroit, and then eventually it was just so ridiculous. People moved, started moving the factories outside of that area, and it sort of unraveled. So that's, it can also happen with California. It'll just take a lot.
That would be insane if they just abandoned all the tech companies in California. I mean, just look at what happened at Flint, Michigan, when all the auto factories pulled out.
Well, look, I think you can. It's always there are all these paradoxical histories. The internet, the point of the internet, in some sense, was to eliminate the tyranny of place. And that was sort of the idea. And then one of the paradoxes about the internet history of the internet was that the internet companies, we're all centered in California. And there have been different waves of how networked, how non-networked they were. I think probably 2021, sort of the COVID moving away from California. The big thing in tech was crypto, and crypto had this conceit of a alternate currency, decentralized, away from the central banks, but also the crypto companies, the crypto protocols. You could do those from anywhere. You could do them outside the U.S. You could do them from Miami, And so crypto was something where the tech could naturally move out of California. And today, probably the core tech narrative is completely flipped to AI. And then there's something about AI that's very centralized. I had this one-liner years ago where it was if we say that crypto is libertarian, can we also say that AI is communist, or something like this, where the natural structure for an AI company looks like it's a big company, and then somehow the AI stuff feels like it's going to be dominated by the big tech companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so if that's the future of tech.
Yeah.
The scale, the natural scale of the industry, tells you that it's going to be extremely hard to get out of the San Francisco Bay Area.
When you look to the future and you try to just make a guess as to how all this is going to turn out with AI, what do you think we're looking at over the next 5 years?
Man, I think I should start by being modest in answering that question and saying that nobody has a clue.
Right, which is true. Which pretty much all the experts say.
I would say. Let me do sort of a history. The riff I always had on this was that I can't stand any of the buzzwords, and I felt AI. There's all this big data, cloud computing. There were all these crazy buzzwords people had, and they always were ways to sort of abstract things and get away from reality somehow, and were not good ways of talking about things. And I thought AI was this incredible abstraction because it can mean the next generation of computers, it can mean the last generation of computers, it can mean anything in between. But if you think about the AI discussion in the 2010s, pre-OpenAI, ChatGPT, and the revolution of the last 2 years, but the 2010s AI discussion, I'll start with the history first. The history was maybe anchored on two visions of what AI meant. One was Nick Bostrom, Oxford Prof, wrote this book, Super Intelligence, 2014. And it was basically AI was going to be this super duper intelligent thing, way godlike intelligence, way smarter than any human being. And then there was sort of the CCP, Chinese Communist rebuttal, the Kai-Fu Lee book from 2018, AI Superpowers. The subtitle was something like The Race for AI Between Silicon Valley and China, or something like this. And it was sort of, it defined AI as, it was fairly low tech, it was just surveillance, facial recognition technology. We would just have this sort of totalitarian, Stalinist monitoring. It didn't require very much innovation. It just required that you apply things. And basically the subtext was China is going to win because we have no ethical qualms in China about applying this sort of basic machine learning to sort of measuring or controlling the population. And those were sort of like, say, two extreme competing visions of what AI would mean in the 2010s, and sort of maybe were sort of the anchors of the AI debate. And then what happened in some sense with ChatGPT in late 22, early 23 was that the achievement you got, you did not get super intelligence, it was not just surveillance tech, but it was, you actually got to the holy grail of what people would have defined AI as from 1950 to 2010. Previous 6 years, before this, people have always said AI, the definition of AI is passing the Turing test. And the Turing test, it basically means that the computer can fool you and it's a somewhat fuzzy test. Obviously, an expert on the computer, a non-expert, doesn't fool you all the time, or some of the time, how good is it? But the first approximation, the Turing test, we weren't even close to passing it in 2021. and then ChatGPT basically passes the Turing test, at least for let's say an IQ 100 it's passed the Turing test, and that was the holy grail. That was the holy grail of AI research for the previous 60 years, and so there's probably some psychological or sociological history where you can say that this weird debate between Bostrom about superintelligence and Kai-Fu Lee about surveillance tech was like this almost like psychological suppression people had, where they were not thinking, they lost track of the Turing test, of the holy grail, because it was about to happen. And it was such a significant, such an important thing that you didn't even want to think about. So I'm tempted to give this a psychological repression theory of the 2020 debates. But be that as it may, the Turing test gets passed, and that's an extraordinary achievement. And then, maybe, and then where does it go from here? There probably are ways you can refine these. It's still going to be a long time to apply it. There is a question. There's this AGI discussion. We get artificial general intelligence, which is a hopelessly vague concept. Which general intelligence is a generally smart human being? Is that just a person with an IQ of 130? Or is it super intelligence? Is it godlike intelligence? So it's sort of an ambiguous thing. But I keep thinking that maybe the AGI question is less important than passing the Turing test. If we got AGI, if we got, let's say, super intelligence, that would be interesting to Mr. God, because you'd have competition for being God. But surely the Turing test is more important for us humans, because it's either a complement or a substitute to humans, and so it's going to rearrange the economic, cultural, political structure of our society in extremely dramatic ways, and I think maybe what's already happened is much more important than anything else that's going to be done. And then it's just going to be a long ways in applying it. One last thought. The analogy I'm always tempted to go to, and these things are never, historical analogies are never perfect, but it's that maybe AI in 2023, 24 is like the internet in 1999, where on one level, it's clear the internet's going to be big, get a lot bigger, it's going to dominate the economy, it's going to rearrange the society in the 21st century. And then at the same time, it was a complete bubble, and people had no idea how the business models work. Almost everything blew up. It took, didn't take that long in the scheme of things. It took, 15, 20 years for it to become super dominant, but it didn't happen sort of in 18 months as people fantasized in 1999. And maybe what we have in AI is something like this. It's figuring out how to actually apply it, in sort of all these different ways is going to take something like 2 decades. But that doesn't distract you from being a really big deal.
It is a really big deal, and I think you're right about the Turing test. Do you think that the lack of acknowledgement or the public celebration, or at least this mainstream discussion, which I think should be everywhere, that we passed the Turing test, do you think it's connected to the fact that this stuff accelerates so rapidly that even though we've essentially breached this new territory, we still know that GPT-5 is going to be better, GPT-6 is going to be insane, and then they're working on these right now, and the change is happening so quickly, we're almost a little reluctant to acknowledge where we're at.
Yeah, I've probably for 15 years or so, often been on the side that there isn't that much progress in science or tech, or not as much as Silicon Valley likes to claim. And even on the AI level, I think it's a massive technical achievement. It's still an open question. Is it actually going to lead to much higher living standards for everybody? The internet was a massive achievement. How much did it raise people's living standards? Much trickier question. But in this world where not much has happened, one of the paradoxes of an era of relative tech stagnation is that when something does happen, we don't even know how to process it. So, I think Bitcoin was a big invention, whether it was good or bad, but it was a pretty big deal, and it was systematically underestimated for at least the first 10, 11 years. And you could trade it. It went up smoothly for 10, 11 years. It didn't get repriced all at once because we're in a world where nothing big ever happens, and so we have no way of processing it when something pretty big happens. The internet was pretty big in '99. Bitcoin was moderately big. The internet was really big. Bitcoin was moderately big, and I'd say passing the Turing test is really big. It's on the same scale as the internet, and because our lived experience is that so little has felt like it's been changing for the last 2 decades. We're probably underestimating it.
It's interesting you say that so little, we feel like so little has changed, because if you're a person, how old are you?
Same age you were, born in 1967.
So in our age, we've seen all the change, right? We saw the end of the Cold War, we saw answering machines, we saw VHS tapes, then we saw the internet, and then where we're at right now, which is like this bizarre moment in time where people carry the internet around with them in their pocket every day. And these super sophisticated computers, they're ubiquitous. Everybody has one. There's incredible technology that's being ramped up every year. They're getting better all the time. And now there's AI. There's AI on your phone. You could access ChatGPT and a bunch of different programs on your phone. And I think that's an insane change. I think that's one of the most, especially with the use of social media, it's one of the most bizarre changes I think our culture's ever.
But it could be a big change culturally or politically. The kinds of questions I'd ask is, how do you measure it economically? How much does it change GDP? How much does it change productivity? And certainly, the story I would generally tell for the last 50 years, since the 1970s, early 70s, is that we've been not absolute stagnation, we've been in an era of relative stagnation where there has been very limited progress in the world of atoms, the world of physical things. And there has been a lot of progress in the world of bits, information, computers, internet, mobile internet, now AI.
What are you referring to when you say in the world of physical things?
It's any, if we had defined technology, if we were sitting here in 1967, the year we were born, and we had a discussion about technology, what technology would have meant? It would have meant computers. It would have also meant rockets. It would have meant supersonic airplanes. It would have meant new medicines. It would have meant the Green Revolution in agriculture, maybe underwater cities. It sort of had, because technology simply gets defined as that which is changing, that which is progressing. And so there was progress on all these fronts. Today, the last 20 years, when you talk about technology, you're normally just talking about information technology. Technology has been reduced to meaning computers. And that tells you that the structure of progress has been weird. There's been this narrow cone of very intense progress around the world of bits, around the world of computers, and then all the other areas have been relatively stagnant. We're not moving any faster. The Concorde got decommissioned in 2003 or whenever. And then with all the low-tech airport security measures, it takes even longer to fly, to get through all of the, from one city to the next. The highways have gone backwards because there are more traffic jams. We haven't figured out ways around those. So we're literally moving slower than we were 40 or 50 years ago. And then and that's sort of the and then of course there's also a sense in which the screens and the devices have this effect of distracting us. So when you're riding a 100-year-old subway in New York City and you're looking at your iPhone, you can look at, wow, this is this cool new gadget, but you're also being distracted from the fact that your lived environment hasn't changed in 100 years. And so there's a question: how important is this world of bits versus the world of atoms? I would say, as human beings, we're physically embodied in a material world. So I would always say this world of atoms is pretty important. And when that's pretty stagnant, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. I was an undergraduate at Stanford, late 80s. And at the time, in retrospect, every engineering area would have been a bad thing to go into. Mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, all these engineering fields where you're tinkering, trying to do new things, because these things turned out to be stuck, they were regulated, couldn't come up with new things to do. Nuclear engineering, aeroasper engineering, people already knew those were really bad ones to go into. They were outlawed, they couldn't make any progress in nuclear reactor designs, stuff like that. Electrical engineering, which is the one that's sort of adjacent to making semiconductors, that one is still okay. And then the only field that was actually going to progress a lot was computer science. And again, it's been very powerful, but that was not the felt sense in the 1980s. In the 1980s, computer science was this ridiculous, inferior subject. I always linguistic. Is always when people use the word science. I'm in favor of science. I'm not in favor of science in quotes. And when it's always a tell that it's not real science. And so when we call it climate science or political science or social science, you're just sort of making it up, and you have an inferiority complex to real science or some of physics or chemistry. And computer science was in the same category as social science or political science. It was a fake field for people who found electrical engineering or math way too hard, and that sort of dropped out of the real science and real engineering.
You don't feel that climate science is real science?
It is. Well, there's several different things one could say. It's possible climate change is happening. It's possible we don't have great accounts of why that's going on. So I'm not questioning any of those things. But how scientific it is, I don't think it's a place where we have really vigorous debates. Maybe the climate change is carbon dioxide emissions, temperatures are going up. Maybe it's methane. Maybe it's people are eating too much steak. It's the cows plateau, and you have to measure how much is methane greenhouse gas versus carbon dioxide. I don't think they're rigorously doing that stuff scientifically. And I think the fact that it's called climate science tells you that it's more dogmatic than anything that's truly science should be.
Why is that? Why is the fact that it's called climate science it's more dogmatic? Because if you said nuclear science, you wouldn't question it, right?
But no one calls it nuclear science. They call it nuclear engineering because I'm just the only thing is I'm just making a narrow linguistic
science point. That is legitimately science.
Well, at this point, people say computer science has worked, but
right
in the 1980s, all I'm saying is it was in the same categories. Let's say social science, political science. It was a tell that the people doing it kind of deep down knew they weren't doing real science.
Well, there's certainly ideology that's connected to climate science. And then there's certainly corporations that are invested in this this prospect of green energy and the concept of green energy, and they're profiting off of it and pushing these different things, whether it be electric car mandates or whatever it is. Like California, I think it's 2035. They have a mandate that all new vehicles have to be electric, which is hilarious when you're connected to a grid that can't support the electric cars it currently has. After they said that, within a month or two, Gavin Newsom asked people to not charge their Teslas because it was summer and the grid was fucked.
Yeah, look, it was all linked into all these ideological projects in all these ways, and there's an environmental project which is and maybe it shouldn't be scientific. There's the hardcore environmentalist argument is we only have one planet. And we don't have time to do science. If we have to do rigorous science and you can prove that we're overheating, it'll be too late. And so if you're a hardcore environmentalist, you don't want to have as high a standard of science. Yeah, my intuition is certainly when you go away from that, you end up with things that are too dogmatic, too ideological. Maybe it doesn't even work, even if the planet's getting warmer. Maybe climate science is not like my question is maybe methane is a worse. Is it more dangerous greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide? We're not even capable of measuring that.
Well, we're also ignoring certain things like regenerative farms that sequester carbon. And then you have people like Bill Gates saying that planting trees to deal with carbon is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous way to do it. Like, how is that ridiculous? They literally turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. It is their food. That's what the food of plants is. That's what powers the whole plant life and the way we have the symbiotic relationship with them. And the more carbon dioxide is, the greener it is, which is why it's greener today on Earth than it has been in 100 years.
Sure.
These are all facts that are inconvenient to people that have a very specific, narrow window of how to approach this.
Sure. Although there probably are ways to steelman the other side too, where maybe the original 1970s, I think the manifesto that's always very interesting from the other side was this book by the Club of Rome, 1972, The Limits of Growth. And we need to head towards a society in which there's 0%, there's very limited growth. Because if you have unlimited growth, you're going to run out of resources. If you don't run out of resources, you'll hit a pollution constraint. But in the 1970s, it was you're going to have overpopulation. You're going to run out of oil. We had the oil shocks, and then by the 90s, it sort of morphed into more of the pollution problem with carbon dioxide, climate change, other environmental things. But there is sort of there's been some improvement in oil, carbon fuels with fracking, things like this in Texas. It's not at the scale that's been enough to give an American standard of living to the whole planet. We consume 100 million barrels of oil a day globally. Maybe fracking can add 10%, 10 million to that. If everybody on this planet has an American standard of living, it's something like 300, 400 million barrels of oil. And I don't think that's there. So that's kind of. I always wonder whether that was the real environmental argument. We can't have an American standard of living for the whole planet. We somehow can't justify this degree of inequality, and therefore, we have to figure out ways to dial back and tax the carbon, restrict it, and maybe there's some sort of a Malthusian calculus that's more about resources than about pollution.
How much of that could the demand for oil could be mitigated by nuclear?
You probably could mitigate it a lot. There's a question why the nuclear thing has gone so wrong. It's especially if you have electric vehicles, right? If combustion engines probably hard to get nuclear to work, but if you shift to electric vehicles, you can charge them, your Tesla cars at night, and that would seemingly work. And there's definitely a history of energy where it was always in the direction of, more intense use. It went from wood to coal to oil, which is a more compact form of energy, and in a way it takes up less of the environment. And then if we move from oil to uranium, that's even, it's even smaller. And so in a sense, the smaller, the more dense the energy is, the less of the environment it takes up. And when we go from oil to natural gas, which takes up more space, and from natural gas to solar or wind, you have to pollute the whole environment by putting up windmills everywhere, or you have to, you have to cover the whole desert with solar panels.
And that is a good way to look at it, because it is a form of pollution.
And so there was a way that nuclear was supposed to be the energy mode of the 21st century. And you have to pollute the whole environment by putting up windmills everywhere, or you have to, you have to cover the whole desert with solar panels.
And that is a good way to look at it, because it is a form of pollution.
And so there was a way that nuclear was supposed to be the energy mode of the 21st century. And then there are all these historical questions. Why did it get stopped? Why did we not go down that route? The standard explanation of why it stopped was that it was there were all these dangers. We had 3 Mile Island in 1979, Chernobyl in 1986, and then the Fukushima one in Japan, I think 2011. And you had these various accidents. My alternate theory on why nuclear energy really stopped is that it was sort of dystopian or even apocalyptic, because it turned out that it was all it turned out to be very dual use. If you build nuclear power plants, it's only sort of one step away from building nuclear weapons, and it turned out to be a lot trickier to separate those two things out than it looked. And I think the signature moment was 1974 or 75 when India gets the nuclear bomb. And the U.S., I believe, had transferred the nuclear reactor technology to India. We thought they couldn't weaponize it, and then it turned out it was pretty easy to weaponize. And then sort of the geopolitical problem with nuclear power was you either, you need a double standard where we have nuclear power in the U.S., but we don't allow other countries to have nuclear power because the U.S. gets to keep its nuclear weapons. We don't let 100 other countries have nuclear weapons, and that's an extreme double standard, probably a little bit hard to justify. Or you need some kind of really effective global governance where you have a one-world government that regulates all this stuff, which doesn't sound that good either. And then sort of the compromise was just to regulate it so much that maybe the nuclear plants got grandfathered in, but it became too expensive to build new ones.
Jesus.
Like even China, which is the country where they're building the most nuclear power plants, they built way less than people expected a decade ago, because they don't trust their own designs, and so they have to copy the over-safety, over-protected designs from the West. And the nuclear power costs too much money. It's cheaper to do coal.
Wow.
So if, I'm not getting the numbers exactly right. If you look at what percent of Chinese electricity was nuclear, it wasn't that high. It was maybe 4 or 5% in 2013, 2014, and percent hasn't gone up in 10 years because they maybe doubled the amount of electricity they use, and maybe they doubled the nuclear, but the relative percentage is still a pretty small part of the mix because it's just more expensive when you have these, over safety designed reactors. There are probably ways to build small reactors that are way cheaper, but then you still have this dual use thing. Do you create plutonium? Are there ways you can create a pathway to building more nuclear weapons?
And if there was innovation, if nuclear engineering had gotten to a point where, let's say there wasn't 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl didn't happen, do you think that it would have gotten to a much more efficient and a much more effective version by now?
Well, my understanding is we have way more efficient designs. We have you can do small reactor designs, which are, you don't need this giant containment structure, so it costs much less per kilowatt hour of electricity you produce. So I think we have those designs. They're just not allowed. But then I think the problem is that if you were able to build them in all these countries all over the world, you still have this dual use problem.
Right.
And again, my alternate history of what really went wrong with nuclear power, it wasn't 3 Mile Island, it wasn't Chernobyl. That's the official. The real story was India getting the bomb.
Wow, that makes sense. It completely makes sense. Jeez Louise.
And then this is always the question about there's always a big picture question. People ask me, if I'm right about this picture of this slowdown in tech, this sort of stagnation in many dimensions, and then there's always a question, why did this happen? And my cop-out answer is always why questions are overdetermined, because it can be. There are multiple reasons. It could be why it could be we became a more feminized, risk-averse society. It could be that the education system worked less well. It could be that we were just out of ideas. The easy ideas have been found. The hard ideas, nature's cupboard was bare. The low-hanging fruit had been picked. So that it can be overdetermined. But I think one dimension that's not to be underrated for the science and tech stagnation was that an awful lot of science and technology had this dystopian or apocalyptic dimension, and probably what happened at Los Alamos in 1945, and then with the thermonuclear weapons in the early 50s, it took a while for it to really seep in, but it had this sort of delayed effect where maybe a stagnant world in which the physicists don't get to do anything and they have to putter around with DEI, and you're not, but you don't build weapons that blow up the world anymore. Is that a feature or a bug? And so the stagnation was sort of like this response. And so it sucks that we've lived in this world for 50 years where a lot of stuff has been inert. But if we had a world that was still accelerating on all these dimensions with supersonics and hypersonic planes and hypersonic weapons and modular nuclear reactors, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here and the whole world would have already blown up. And so we're in the stagnant path of the multiverse because it had this partially protective thing, even though in all these other ways I feel it's deeply deranged our society.
That's a very interesting perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. It really does. And particularly the dual use thing with nuclear power, and especially distributing that to other countries. When you talk about the stagnation in this country, I don't know how much you follow this whole UAP nonsense. I know we met, what was that guy's name at your place? The guy who did Chariots of the Gods?
Oh, Von Daniken.
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't. You thought he was too crazy. You like Hancock, but you don't like Von Daniken.
I didn't think he's too crazy. He just willfully, in my opinion, ignores evidence that would show that some of the things that he's saying have already been solved. And I think his hypothesis is all related to this concept that we have been visited and that's how all these things were built and that this technology was brought here from another world. And I think he's very ideologically locked into these ideas. And I think the much more compelling idea is that there were very advanced cultures for some reason, 10,000 years, whatever the year was where they built some of the insane structures. It's 4,500 years ago they roughly think the pyramids were built. Like whatever the fuck was going on there, I think those were human beings. I think those were human beings in that place, in that time, and I think they had some sort of very sophisticated technology that was lost. Things get lost. Things get lost in cataclysms. Things get lost in... They can get lost in disease and famine, and there's all sorts of war, all sorts of reasons. Burning the Library of Alexandria, there's all sorts of ways that technology gets lost forever. And you can have today someone living in Los Angeles in the most sophisticated high-tech society the world has ever known, while you still have people that live in the Amazon that live in the same way that they have lived for thousands of years. So those things can happen in the same planet at the same time. And I think while the rest of the world was essentially operating at a much lower vibration, there were people in Egypt that were doing some extraordinary things. I don't know how they got the information. They did get that. There's no real compelling evidence that they did. I think there's much more compelling evidence that a cataclysm happened. When you look at the Younger Dryas impact theory, it's all entirely based on science. It's entirely based on core samples, iridium content, also massive changes in the environment over a very short period of time, particularly the melting of ice caps in North America, and just impact craters all around the world that we know something happened roughly 11,000 years ago, and probably again 10,000 years ago. I think it's a regular occurrence on this planet that things go sideways and there's massive natural disasters, and I think that it's very likely that
there's the Bronze Age civilization collapse somewhere in the mid-12th century BC, and probably the in some ways the one which we have the best history is the fall of the Roman Empire, which was obviously a culmination of the classical world, and it's somehow extremely unraveled. So I think my view on it is probably somewhere between yours and the Von Daniken. No, not Von Daniken. I'm more on the other side. But let me try to define why this. We can probably agree on why this is so important today. This is not just of antiquarian interest, and the reason it matters today is because the alternative. If you say civilization has seen great rises and falls. It's gone through these great cycles. Maybe the Bronze Age civilizations were very advanced, but someone came up with iron weapons. So there was just one dimension where they progressed, but then everything else they could destroy. And so,
particularly the dual use thing with nuclear power, and especially distributing that to other countries. When you talk about the stagnation in this country, like, I don't know how much you follow this whole UAP nonsense. I know we met, what was that guy's name at your place? The guy who did Chariots of the Gods?
Oh, Von Daniken.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't, you thought he was too crazy. You like Hancock, but you don't like Von Daniken.
I didn't think he's too crazy. He just willfully, in my opinion, ignores evidence that would show that some of the things that he's saying have already been solved. And I think his hypothesis is all related to this concept that we have been visited and that's how all these things were built and that this technology was brought here from another world. And I think he's very ideologically locked into these ideas. And I think a much more compelling idea is that there were very advanced cultures for some reason 10,000 years ago, whatever it was, whatever the year was where they built some of the insane structures. It's 4,500 years ago, they roughly think the pyramids were built. Like whatever the fuck was going on there, I think those were human beings. I think those were human beings in that place, in that time. And I think they had some sort of very sophisticated technology that was lost. And things can get lost. Things can get lost in cataclysms. Things can get lost in... They can get lost in disease and famine, and there's all sorts of war, all sorts of reasons. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, there's all sorts of ways that technology gets lost forever. And you can have today someone living in Los Angeles in the most sophisticated high-tech society the world has ever known, while you still have people that live in the Amazon that live in the same way that they have lived for thousands of years. So those things can happen in the same planet at the same time. And I think while the rest of the world was essentially operating at a much lower vibration, there were people in Egypt that were doing some extraordinary things. I don't know how they got the information. Maybe they did get it from visitors. Maybe they did. But there's no real compelling evidence that they did. I think there's much more compelling evidence that a cataclysm happened. When you look at the Younger Dryas impact theory, it's all entirely based on science. It's entirely based on core samples and iridium content and also massive changes in the environment over a very short period of time, particularly the melting of the ice caps in North America and just impact craters all around the world that we know something happened roughly 11,000 years ago, and probably again 10,000 years ago. I think it's a regular occurrence on this planet that things go sideways and there's massive natural disasters, and I think that it's very likely that...
There's the Bronze Age civilization collapse somewhere in the mid 12th century BC, and probably the in some ways the one in which we have the best history is the fall of the Roman Empire, which was obviously the culmination of the classical world, and it somehow extremely unraveled. So I think my view on it is probably somewhere between yours and the
Von Daniken?
No, not Von Daniken. I'm more on the the other side. But let me try to define why this. We can probably agree on why this is so important today. This is not just of antiquarian interest, and the reason it matters today is because the alternative. If you say civilization has seen great rises and falls. It's gone through these great cycles. Maybe the Bronze Age civilizations were very advanced, but someone came up with iron weapons. So there's just one dimension where they progressed, but then everything else they could destroy. And so, the fall of the Roman Empire was again this pretty cataclysmic thing where there were diseases and then there were political things that unraveled, but somehow, it was a massive regression for 400, 500, 600 years into the Dark Ages, and the sort of naive, the progressive views, things always just got monotonically better, and there's sort of this revisionist, purely progressive history where even the Roman Empire didn't decline, and even this one sort of stupid way to quantify this stuff is with pure demographics. And so it's the question, how many people lived in the past? And the rises and falls of civilization story is there were more people who lived in the Roman Empire because it was more advanced, it could support a larger population, and then the population declined. The city of Rome maybe had 1 million people at its peak, and then by 650 AD, it's down to 10,000 people or less. You have this complete collapse in population, and then the sort of alternate, purely progressive view is the population has always just been monotonically increasing because it's a measure of how, in some sense, things in aggregate have always been getting better. So I am definitely on your side that population had great rises and falls, civilizations had great rises and falls. And so that part of it, I agree with you, or even some variant of what Hancock or von Daniken say. The place where I would say I think things are different is I don't think and therefore it seems possible something could happen to our civilization. That's always the upshot of it. If it had been monotonically always progressing, then there's nothing we should worry about. Nothing can possibly go wrong. And then certainly the thing, the sort of alternate Hancock, von Daniken, Joe Rogan history of the world tells us is that we shouldn't take our civilization for granted. There are things that can go really haywire. I agree with that. The one place where I differ is I do think our civilization today is, on some dimensions, way more advanced than any of these past civilizations. I don't think any of them had nuclear weapons. I don't think any of them had, spaceships, or anything like that. And so the failure mode is likely to be somewhat different from these past ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think technology progressed in a different direction. That's what I think. I think structural technology, building technology, had somehow or another achieved levels of competence that's not available today. When you look at the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, there's 2,300,000 stones in it. The whole thing points to due north, south, east, and west. It's an incredible achievement. The stones, some of them were moved from a quarry that was 500 miles away through the mountains. They have no idea how they did it. Massive stones. The ones inside the King's Chamber, where they're the biggest ones are 80 tons. It's crazy. The whole thing's crazy. How did they do that? Whatever they did without machines, supposedly. They did without the use of the combustion engine. They didn't have electricity. And yet they were able to do something that stands the test of time, not just so you could look at it. You can go to the Acropolis and see the Parthenon. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. It's incredible. But I can understand how people could have built it. The pyramids is one of those things you just look at and you go, what the fuck was going on here? What was going on here? And none of these people are still around. You have this strange culture now that's entirely based around, you have Cairo and an enormous population of visitors, right? Which is a lot of it. People just going to stare at these ancient relics. What was going on that those people were so much more advanced than anyone else in the world?
Yeah, I'm not sure to anchor on the technological part, but I think the piece that is very hard for us to comprehend is what motivated the culture.
Well, how did they do it?
Why did they do it? Why were you motivated?
Sure, why, but also how. How is a big one, because it's really difficult to solve. There's no traditional, conventional explanations for the construction, the movement of the stones, the amount of time that it would take. And if you move 10 stones a day, I believe it takes 664 years to make one of those pyramids. So how many people were involved? How long did it take? How'd they get them there? How'd they figure out how to do it? How come the shittier pyramids seem to be dated later? What was going on in that particular period of time where they figured out how to do something so extraordinary that even today, 4,500 years later, we stare at it and we go, I don't know. I don't know what the fuck they did.
I haven't studied it carefully enough. I'll trust you that it's very hard. I think I would say the real mystery is why were they motivated? And it's because you can't live in a pyramid. It's just it was just the afterlife of the pharaoh.
There's some debate about that. Christopher Dunn is an engineer who believes that it was some sort of a power plant. He's got this very bizarre theory that there was a chamber that exists. If you see the structure of the pyramid, the inside of it, there's a chamber that's subterranean. And he believes this subterranean chamber was pounding on the surface of the earth and of the walls of the thing, creating this very specific vibration. They had shafts that came down into the queen's chamber. These shafts, they would pour chemicals into these shafts, and then there was limestone at the end of it. This is all his theory, not mine. The end of it, there was this limestone, which is permeable, right? So the limestone, which is porous, these gases come through and creates this hydrogen that's inside of this chamber. Then there are these shafts inside the king's chamber that are they're getting energy from space, gamma rays and all the shit from space, and then it's going through these chambers, which are very specifically designed to target these gases and put them into this chamber where they would interact with this energy, and he believes it's enough to create electricity.
Man,
it's a crazy theory. But
look, I'm always too fast to debunk all these things, but just coming back to our earlier conversation, it must have been a crazy power plant to have a containment structure much bigger than a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, well, it's ridiculous.
And so,
but it's also a different kind of technology, right? If nuclear technology was completely not on the table, they didn't understand atoms at all, but they did understand that there's rays that come from space and that you could somehow harness the energy of these things with specific gases and through some method convert that into some form of electricity.
But if it takes so much power to put all these rocks in the pyramid, you have to always look at how efficient the power plant is. So it can't just be it has to be like the craziest reaction ever to justify such a big containment structure, because even nuclear power plants don't work economically. Barely work.
Well, they didn't do a lot of them. They only did this one in Giza, and then there was other pyramids that he thinks had different functions that were smaller. But the whole purpose of it is, or the whole point of it is, we don't know what the fuck it is. We don't know why they did it. We have a group of new archaeologists that are looking at it from a completely different theory. They're not looking at it like it's a tomb. The established archaeologists have insisted that this is a tomb for the pharaoh. The newer archaeologists, established archaeologists, are looking at it and considering whether or not there were some other uses for this thing, and one of them is the concept of the power plant.
I'm always, I don't know if this is an alternate history theory, but I'm always into the James Fraser, Golden Bough, Rene Girard, violence, sacred history, where you have always this question about the origins of monarchy and kingship, and the sort of Girard Fraser intuition is that it's something like if every king is a kind of living God, then we have to also believe the opposite, that maybe every god is a dead or murdered king, and that somehow societies were organized around scapegoats. The scapegoats were, there was sort of a crisis in the archaic community. It got blamed on a scapegoat. The scapegoat was attributed all these powers, and then at some point, the scapegoat, before he gets executed, figures out a way to postpone his execution and turn the power into something real. And so there's sort of this very weird adjacency between the monarch and the scapegoat, and then I don't know, the sort of riff on the first pyramid did not need to be invented. It was just the stones that were thrown on a victim, and then it somehow, and that's the original form
that were thrown on a victim.
A community stones a victim to death. A tribe runs after a victim, you stone him to death, throw stones on the victim. That's how you create the first tomb. And then
as it gets more complicated, you create a tomb that's 2 million stones.
And you get a pharaoh. You get a pharaoh who figures out a way to postpone his own execution or something like this. I think there's I'm blank on the name of this ritual, but I believe in the old Egyptian kingdoms, which were sort of around the time of the Great Pyramids or even before. It was something like in the 30th year of the reign of the pharaoh gets transformed into a living god, and then this perhaps dates to a time where in the 30th year of the pharaoh's reign, the pharaoh would get ritually sacrificed or killed, and you have all these societies where the kings were allowed to rule for an allotted time. You become king and you draw a number of pebbles out of a vase, and that corresponds to how many years.
Was this Jamie?
The Sed Festival.
Sed Festival of Tales, ancient Egyptian ceremony to celebrate the continued rule of Pharaoh. The name was taken from the name of the Egyptian wolf god, one of whose name was
this is what I'm talking about.
Or said, the less formal feast name, the feast of the tail is derived.
Next paragraph's the one to start.
Okay.
That one right there. The ancient festival might perhaps have been instituted to replace a ritual of murdering a pharaoh who was unable to continue to rule effectively because of age or condition.
Interesting. So you can't kill him now.
And then eventually, said festivals were jubilees. Several of the rulers had the throne for 30 years.
And then every 3 to 4 years after that.
So when it becomes unthinkable to kill the pharaoh gets turned into a living god. Before that, the pharaoh gets murdered and then gets worshipped as a dead pharaoh or distant god.
That's interesting, but it still doesn't solve the engineering puzzle. The engineering puzzle is the biggest one. Like, how do they do that?
Well, the one I'm focusing on is the motivational puzzle.
Why did if you have all the motivation in the world, if you want to build a structure that's insane to build today, and you're doing it 4,500 years ago, we're dealing with a massive puzzle.
I think the motivational part's the harder one to solve. If you can figure out the motivation, you'll figure out a way to organize the whole society, and if you can get the whole society working on it.
English is funny. But don't you think that his grasp of power was in peril in the first place, which is why they decided to come up with this idea of turning him into a living god? So to have the amount of resources and power, and then the engineering, and then the understanding of whatever methods they use to shape and move these things.
Well, this is always the anthropological debate between Voltaire, the Enlightenment thinker of the 18th century, and Durkheim, the 19th century anthropologist. And Voltaire believes that religion originates as a conspiracy of the priests to maintain power. And so politics comes first, the politicians invent religion. And then Durkheim says the causation's the other way around, that somehow religion came first, and then politics somehow came out of it. Now, of course, once the politics comes out of it, the priests, the religious authorities have political power. They figure out ways to manipulate it, things like this. But I find the Durkheim story far more plausible than the Voltaire one. I think the religious categories are primary, and the political categories are secondary.
So you think the religion came first? But what about if we emanated from tribal societies? Tribal societies have always had leaders. When you have leaders, you're going to have dissent, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have politicking. You have people negotiating to try to maintain power, keep everything organized. That's the origin of politics, correct?
I'm reloading.
I think that's a
whitewashed
Enlightenment rationalist description of the origin of politics.
I don't know.
What do you think the origin of politics is?
I think it's far more violent than that. What you're giving me is
it's very violent.
Control
of power and maintaining power involves murder and sabotage.
Well, that's more like it.
Yeah.
You're right.
What you gave me a minute ago sounds more like a social contract theory, in which people sit down, negotiate, and have a nice legal chit-chat to draw up the social contract. That is a complete fiction.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think that there was probably various levels of stability that were achieved when agriculture and when establishments were constructed that were near resources. We didn't have to worry as much about food and water and things along those lines. Things probably got a little bit more civil. But I think that the origins of it are like the origins of all human conflict. It's filled with murder.
Well, I think at the beginning was madness and murder.
Yeah, madness and murder.
And I don't know. I don't know if it got that much more rational. I don't know if it's that much more rational today.
Well,
so
in some ways it's not, right?
And this is again back to the the progressive conception. Have we really progressed? How much have we really progressed from that? But yeah, my version is that it was much more. It was organized around acts of mass violence, like maybe you externalize it onto a mastodon or hunting some big animal or something like this, but the real problem of violence, it wasn't external. It was mostly internal. It was violence with people who are near you, proximate to you, It wasn't even natural cataclysms or other tribes. It was sort of much more the internal stuff, and it's very different. I think the human situation is somehow very, very different from something like, I don't know, an ape-primate hierarchy. Where in an ape context, you have an alpha male. He's the strongest, and there's some sort of natural dominance, and you don't need to have a fight to the death typically, because you know who's the strongest, and you don't need to push it all the way. In a human context, it's always possible for 2 or 3 guys to gang up on the alpha male. So it's somehow the culture is more important, and if they can talk to each other, and you get language, and then they can coordinate and they can gang up on the leader, and you have to stop them from ganging up on the leader. How do you do that? And so there's some sort of radical difference between a human and a, let's say, a pre-human world.
Have you seen Chimp Empire?
No.
Chimp Empire is a fascinating documentary series on Netflix where these scientists have been embedded with this tribe of chimpanzees for decades. And so because they were embedded, they had very specific rules. You have to maintain at least 20 yards from you and any of the chimps. No food. You can never have food, and don't look them in the eye. And as long as you do that, they don't feel that you're a threat, and they think of you as a natural part of their environment, almost like you don't exist. And they behave completely naturally. Well, it shows in that sometimes it's not the largest, strongest one, and that some chimps form bonds with other chimps, and they form coalitions, and they do have some sort of politic, and they do help each other. They groom each other. They do specific things for each other. And then one of the things that happens also, they get invaded by other chimps, and that chimps leave and they go on patrol, and other chimps gang up on them and they kill them, and they try to fight and battle over resources. So it's not nearly as cut and dry as the strongest chimp prevails, because one of the chimps that was dominant was an older chimp, and he was smaller than some of the other chimps, but he had formed a coalition with all these other chimps, and they all respected him, and they all knew that they would be treated fairly. And being treated fairly is a very important thing with chimpanzees. They get very jealous if they think that things are not fair, which is why that guy was attacked. And you know that guy who had a pet chimpanzee. He brought it a birthday cake. The other chimps weren't getting a piece of cake, and someone had fucked up and left a door open. They got out and mauled this guy because he didn't give them some of the cake.
Yeah, so I find all of that quite plausible, but I think both of us can be correct. So there's the true story of hominization, of how we became human. There's a way to tell it where it's continuous with our animal past, and where it's just there's things like this with the chimpanzees or the baboons or other primates, and then there is a part of the story that I think is also more discontinuous. My judgment is we probably in a Darwinian context we always stress the continuity. I'm always a little bit the contrarian, and so I believe in Darwin's theory, but I think we should also be skeptical of the way it's too dogmatic, and Darwin's theories make us gloss over the discontinuities. And I think the one type of, and it doesn't happen overnight, one type of fairly dramatic discontinuity is that humans have something like language, and even though chimpanzees probably they have an IQ of 80, or they're pretty smart, but when you don't have a rich symbolic system, that leads to sort of a very, very different kind of structure. And there's something about language and the kind of coordination that allows, and the ways that it enables you to coordinate on violence, and then it encourages you to channel violence in certain sacred religious directions. I think creates something radically different about human society. We differ. Humans tell each other stories. A lot of the stories are not true; they're myths. But I think that's some sort of very important difference from even our closest primate relatives. But this is sort of like another way of getting at what's so crazy about ChatGPT and passing the Turing test. Because if we had sat here 2 years ago and you asked me, what is the distinctive feature of a human being? what makes someone a human, and how in a way that differs from everybody else. It's not perfect.
Bro,
My go-to
dude,
answer would have been language. You're a 3-year-old,
Leave me
you're an
alone.
80-year-old.
I can do it.
Just about all humans can speak languages.
Thank you,
Just
thank
about
you.
all non-humans cannot speak languages. It's this binary
I don't know
thing.
much
And then
English.
that's sort of a way of telling us again
Mexican.
why passing the Turing test was way more important than super intelligence or anything else.
Yeah, I can see that. What
Sorry,
do you
I
think?
don't want to go back to that tangent. but
No,
that's-
no, it's a good
go ahead,
tangent.
connect
It's
it.
great. Keep tangenting off. Have fun. Great.
Big monster.
do you
Big
think-
monster.
What do you think the factor was?
Big
There's a lot of
monster.
debate about this. Like the factor
can
was
do
that
it.
separated
Hello?
us from these animals and why we became what we became. Because we're so vastly different than
Big
any other
mon-
primate.
I don't know.
Like, so what do you think took place?
They
Like the
don't
doubling
think
of the
so.
human brain size over a period of 2 million years is one of the greatest mysteries in the entire fossil record. We don't know what the fuck happened. There's a lot of theories. The throwing arm, cooking meat. There's a lot of theories.
Go, go, go. Go. You put it in the coordinate. Where is the coordinate? The coordinate.
Change your max. Got a truck here.
Coordinate. Where is? I can see him in the map. Where's the coordinate? Can you repeat? Where is? Where is? Justin? Yes? Where?
Switch your max. Changing mags. Switching mags.
Okay. Me too. I don't know. Where is he, bro? I don't see he. Turtle Bay. Car. Do you know where is he? Yes, the numbers and letters, the coordinates. Where is?
I'm reloading.
Where is he, bro? Where is?
Dobbs to strike team. Let's start with some basics. Ping a contract on your TAC map. Get it done, get out in one piece.
You're right. Where is? The number and the letter.
Changing bags.
Well, I go to the expression. Yeah.
Changing bags.
Follow me? Well.
I'm reloading.
ETA 15 seconds. Stay clear of the LZ as they bring her down.
Go, go, go! GG, bro. GG. GG.
Instruments aren't cooperating anymore. This is going to be a bad one. Very bad. Are our fuel team safe yet? Strike team, stay ahead of that storm front and you'll be okay.